Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now, we begin. It's been 2 weeks now, but inside this house, time doesn't seem to pass at all. I'll get straight to the point, because dancing around it feels like giving more power to what happened, and I don't want to give any power to this thing. My boy was found collapsed in the backyard early that morning. My husband found him, said he was lying on his side, near the old oak tree he used to climb when he was little. There was no sign of anything, nothing broken, nothing torn, just dried blood behind his head and his clothes dirty with mud. We called the paramedics, but he wasn't breathing anymore. They didn't even try to take him. They just stood there asking questions, asking how he could have fallen that way with that kind of mark. And we had no answers. He was only 20, my youngest. I always said he seemed older than me, the way he protected me. The wake was held in our living room like it always was with my mother, with my father. Here in small-town Nebraska, that's how we do things. You put the casket in the center, scatter some chairs around, light candles, pray, and wait for time to pass. But this time stood still. I can't explain it. The house became quiet in a way that wasn't just silence. It was like the air had gotten stuck halfway. There were people there, but nobody spoke. And every time I looked at his face, it seemed like he hadn't gone yet. Not everyone came. His brothers didn't make it in time. His father's family stayed outside, and only 2 of my friends stayed through the night with me, praying to hold it together when they said they were going to close the casket. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I asked them to wait. I said I wanted to give him one last kiss, a real mother's kiss. I got close, placed my hand on his forehead. It was cold, but it was still him. His mouth was slightly open, like he was still going to say something. But there was something there. It looked like a lump, a fold, something under his tongue. I leaned closer, took the fabric from his collar, and tried to carefully pull out what was inside his mouth. I was afraid to move too much, but I took it out. It was a photograph, a folded photograph, wet inside, but you could still see it. It was me sitting on the couch right here in this house, wearing the same clothes I was wearing at that moment. Identical, same blouse, same skirt, same way of holding my hands, same look in my eyes. The face was scratched with something red, thick, dry, like paint or something else. On the back of the photo, just one crooked sentence. When I go down, you start to fall. My arms started trembling right away. I stepped back without making any noise. I didn't show it to anyone. I tucked the photo into my blouse pocket and sat there until the casket left. The next day, I started feeling things, small things. The window that opened by itself, the dog that disappeared, the glass that fell from the shelf, even though nobody was near it. But what scared me most was seeing myself, not in the mirror, but in the reflection of the china cabinet glass or the turned-off television screen, always the same way as in the photo, sitting with my hands crossed in my lap and my eyes kind of lost. I started catching myself in that position without meaning to. When I'd notice, I'd be sitting there just like that, just like in the photo. I tore up the photo. On the second day, I tore it up and threw it in the trash out back. The next morning, it was on the table, whole again. I folded it again and put it in a box with his clothes. I buried that box near the chicken coop. 2 days later, it appeared on my pillow with the writing on the back more faded, like it was wearing away, like it didn't need much more time. My memory started failing. There were days I'd fall asleep on the couch and wake up in the exact pose from the photo, wearing the same clothes, same hair, and the same feeling that I'd never gotten up, that it was another piece of me that had stayed there in that place. My friends stopped coming. They say I'm talking nonsense, but it's not madness. I know he took me with him. They just forgot to close my casket. I don't know who put that photograph in his mouth, but it's some kind of binding spell. It's like he left a thread pulling, a way to make sure I'd follow. Or maybe he did it himself. Maybe wanting me to stay close, maybe because he thought I was already gone even while alive. Since that photo appeared, I'm not here the same way anymore. If I look at myself in the mirror now, I know what I'll see. Me there, stopped, with my hand on my lap, looking at nothing just like the photo. But I won't look today, because the last time I looked, the reflection moved before I did. I tried to burn it. I didn't tell anyone. I closed everything up, went to the back of the yard in the afternoon when the sun was already turning to shadow, and lit an old can with alcohol and pieces of cloth. I put the photo inside and watched. It wrinkled, got a burned edge, made a strong smell, but it didn't catch fire. The image wouldn't disappear, the paper wouldn't darken. It just danced over the flame without falling apart. I put everything out, came back with the photo folded in my pocket. When I entered the house, I swear on everything. The television turned on by itself, black screen, and there in the reflection, I was already sitting on the couch again, just like that day. From that day on, I stopped going out. I got scared of coming back and not recognizing myself anymore. Scared that one day I'd look in the mirror and see someone else, or see nobody at all. What hurt most was the time, because I started forgetting the days. I'd sleep and wake up in the same position. I'd wake up with different light, like hours had passed without me. Once I woke up with the photo on my chest, open. The sentence on the back wasn't written anymore. There was nothing there, like it had already done what it needed to do, like it had just been a warning. I started hearing his room open at night. The door always creaked, but he used to lock it. And now there's nobody there. Just the clothes, the books, the sneakers turned sideways. The other day I found his sandals on the porch covered with dirt, and I know nobody moved them. I'm starting to think he still comes in, not the way we think, not to take things or leave messages, but the way someone enters who wants someone back. You know when we call from inside and nobody hears? Well, I think he heard. He just brought something along. He brought a piece of me with him, or left me here like a portrait, a leftover, while he carries the rest to wherever he went. Sometimes I think if he did this because he missed me, or if it was punishment, because I spoke to him the day before. I spoke to him in a bad way. I was tired. He wanted to go out. I asked him not to go. I said I dreamed of bad things. He laughed, gave me a kiss on the forehead, left, came back. But by the next day, he was already fallen. I'll never know if he understood that I didn't want to fight, that it was just fear of losing him. And now I don't know anymore if he left, or if he just changed places. The other day, the radio turned on by itself. It was playing a song he liked. I sat down without thinking. When I realized it, I was just like the photo, with my head slightly turned to the side, like it was a pose, like someone was taking another picture. What if they are? What if there's another photo being taken of me right now? What if the one I found was just the first step? And now I'm the one turning into an image, being saved, to go into someone else's mouth later. It doesn't make sense. But this isn't about logic, it's about the thing inside the ritual. The thing that starts small, that hides, because nobody expects to find a mother inside her son's mouth. But I was there, same clothes, same position, face scratched. The hardest part is that nobody looks at me right anymore. My husband only asks if I took my medicine. The neighbors don't even knock anymore. My children avoid talking about their brother, and the photo, it didn't disappear. It's here with me. It got old, got worn, but it's alive. It's like it breathes in the dark. I tried again. I went to the bridge and threw it in the river. 2 days later, it appeared on my pillowcase, folded, drying. There was one night I felt something sitting on the couch next to me slowly. The cushion sank. I felt the warmth, but there was nobody there. I didn't even need to look. I knew who it was. It was my boy, or what was left of him, or what he became after he took me. I wanted to tell him I still love him, that this wasn't necessary, that I would have gone if he had just called, but I think he called the way he knew how. And now I'm here, stopped, waiting, because there are days when I notice I'm less, that there's less thinking, less movement, less wanting and more reflection, more pose, more silence. The other day I looked at myself sideways. The light was low, the mirror was foggy, but I saw that my face was getting paler, like paper, like the photo. If they bury me tomorrow, nobody will notice the difference, because what was supposed to be me already went with him. And what's here is just waiting to end since that day, since that photo, since the moment my name appeared written under my son's tongue. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like. But if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. You want to know what made me stop accepting night shifts? It wasn't fear, it wasn't noise, or those stories about people who walk into the wrong place at the cemetery. It was too much silence. At the time, I was a conservation technician for a contracted funeral home. We'd get called to organize the environment, help with body preparation when needed, align the caskets, that sort of thing. The day I'm going to tell you about was after a bus accident that went down the mountain and lost control on a curve. There was heavy fog. It was early morning. By the end of the day, there were 4 confirmed bodies released by the families. All people from around here in Colorado, but there was a 5th one. And this one came from another city with a red tag on the side of the casket and a handwritten warning I'll never forget. Do not open, sealed for security. What wasn't on the tag, but you hear through the grapevine, is that the body came intact, but the face was disfigured. There was no way to recognize it. The identification was made only by a number, cross-referencing boarding data with seat assignments. I was alone there for several hours in the makeshift chapel, taking care of the environment. It was a space set up hastily, with tarps stretched on the sides, iron framework, and damp carpet on the floor. Those large flowers ordered at the last minute were already starting to wilt. The smell was too sweet and warm. The fans spun poorly, made more noise than wind. I remember exactly the position of the caskets. 2 on each side and the 5th in the middle, further back, against the tarp wall. It was a normal shift for me. I arrived, tested the lighting, left emergency candles in the corner, checked the casket protocol, arranged the tags at the foot. There was nothing suspicious at first, but that fifth one gave a different feeling. Its varnish was peeling on one of the edges. The lid didn't fit as well as the others, and there was a scratch on the brass, like someone had tried to force a key there, you know. But I didn't touch it, because sealed caskets don't get touched. Around 3 in the morning, the light started flickering. And before I could go to the circuit breaker outside, everything went out. It wasn't a general outage, just there. I'm a technician. I know how to recognize when it's an overload from poor installation. But the curious thing is that the fan stopped a second after the lights. I stayed quiet waiting for the emergency power to return. The backup lights were slow. The flashlight I keep in my pocket also had weak batteries. It was in that total darkness that I heard the sound. It wasn't animal noise or crying. It was wet. It was like someone breathing very slowly, but with a wet throat. You know that sound from inside wet plastic? It came from the direction of the fifth casket. I thought it's my imagination, it's fatigue, the mind plays tricks. But then the emergency light came back on dim, and what I saw made me take 2 steps back without thinking. The lid of the fifth casket was open. I didn't hear wood hitting or creaking. It was just there, propped to the side, like someone had removed it carefully, like it was waiting for someone to look. I started getting closer. I approached calmly, as absurd as it was. Part of me wanted to believe that someone had entered the room during the blackout, that some relative had come early, that the lid wasn't properly fixed. I wanted it to be anything like that. But when I stopped in front of the casket, it was empty. There was nothing inside, no flour, no disturbed lining, no dirt, no sign that something had come out or gone in. It was like the body had never been placed there, or like it had gotten out on its own. I froze, and in the next second, something moved, not in the casket, but in me for a few seconds. I swear on everything. It was like I was lying inside there, with my arms glued to my sides, looking at the thin wooden ceiling, with the smell of varnish entering my nose. And when my eyes tried to look away, I saw myself looking down, me standing and me lying down at the same time, and the me lying down blinked. Then I blinked too, and everything returned. I was standing next to the casket, which now had the lid back on. But I was never the same since that, because something went wrong in that room, and I think someone was buried in my place. I didn't comment on anything that night. I waited for dawn. The first family members started arriving with swollen faces, walking slowly, and soon the muffled noise that always happens at collective wakes formed. People whispering, sniffling, trying to figure out who was who. The confusion was so great that nobody noticed the fifth casket, nobody asked, nobody wanted to see, because they already knew it couldn't be opened. But I knew what I had seen. I know what I felt, but there's no way to explain it to anyone without seeming crazy. The closest I came to commenting was with the driver who helped take the caskets. I mentioned it in passing, asked if they'd ever seen a casket with the lid out of place. He laughed, said it happens, lack of alignment or people messing with it, but nobody had messed with it there. Nobody besides me had been in that environment between 3 and 4 in the morning. After that shift, I started noticing details that weren't there before. First were the looks. People who had known me for years started averting their eyes. Even the cleaning guys, who always came by the chapel to get coffee, started treating me with that care, like someone who thinks the person is going through something but doesn't want to ask. I started feeling that my reflection wasn't right. On the first day, I thought it was the lighting. You know that mirror in the break room? It's behind the cooler, kind of worn. I looked at myself in it, blinked, and I swear the reflection didn't blink with me, it delayed a second. Another day, I stopped in the company bathroom with a big mirror, well lit. I made a quick movement, passed my hand over my face, and my image delayed again. A fraction of a second, but enough to give me a shock. I didn't know anymore if I was me, or if I was seeing someone trying to remember how I move. It might sound crazy, but it wasn't, because I started having a strange feeling when I passed through the corridors where caskets are prepared. That line of caskets leaning against the wall, all wrapped with tape, with the funeral home name marked in pen on the side. I passed by once and stopped without meaning to. There was my name on one, full name, spelled right, last name correct, with a new tag. I asked the warehouse. They said it was a draft error. They used my file to fill out the test form, but that froze me because I never authorized using my name on any form. From that day on, my head had no peace, and the nightmares began. But the worst part wasn't even the nightmare itself. It was the part when I woke up, looked in the mirror, and took a few seconds to recognize my face. It was mine, but it seemed less mine, like it had been reproduced, like it was an attempt at a copy. And whenever I closed my eyes, I went back to the lining of that fifth casket. The smell of wood, the sound of the wet carpet at the bottom of the chapel, the sound of the tarp shaking in the mountain wind. There was one night I woke up sweating, went to drink water, and saw my reflection in the kitchen window. But I was wearing a dark suit. At that moment, I was in a t-shirt. My reflection was dressed to be waked awake, standing, looking at me with a dead face. And I, with the glass in my hand, just stood there looking. I didn't scream, didn't run, just waited for him to blink, and he blinked. That's when I understood what I'd been afraid of since that day. Someone was buried in my place, or worse, something came out and stayed here in my place. The following week, I requested leave. I claimed personal issues, was transferred to another unit. Today, I don't go near any casket anymore. I don't touch them, don't enter chapels, don't look at white flowers anymore, and especially don't pass by mirrors in dark places. Because every time the reflection delays, I think what's there isn't me anymore. There's only one thing that never left my head, and I tell anyone who works with this. At a wake with 5 caskets, nobody notices if there's one too many or if they buried the wrong one. I went because I thought I should. We hadn't spoken in over 10 years, but we grew up practically on the same street in small-town Montana. We played ball together, fought over stupid things, laughed at the same jokes for a long time. And when they told me he'd suffered an accident and that the body would be waked in the community hall, I thought maybe it was a way to say goodbye properly. What I didn't understand right away was the warning. The message came in a group from school days. Someone wrote, "Guys, his dad is asking not to bring anything with glass or mirrors. If you have a phone with a reflective back, leave it in the car. He's serious. Whoever doesn't follow this can't come in." I thought it was some religious thing, I don't know. Some people believe that reflection traps the soul or interferes with passage. At the time I thought it was that, a strange way of dealing with grief, but it wasn't. It wasn't just that. When I got there, his father was at the entrance, sitting in a plastic chair with his head down, a tissue wrapped in his hand. He seemed to be there only in body, but as soon as someone approached with a phone or reflective glasses, he'd look up and ask them to leave it outside. He'd just point to the gate with his head, without anger, just fear. The place was ugly, cold, smelled of old paint, damp cement, and something sweet that bothered me from the door. They'd covered the windows with black curtains. There were 2 emergency lights hanging with exposed wires, and a candle on the floor in an open glass jar. I noticed that even the bathroom mirror had been covered with a garbage bag taped with duct tape, and outside they'd put a black cloth over the wall clock glass. I remember this marked me, because who notices that in a moment like this? But then time went by, and I saw the problem was different. Some people stayed too long staring. They didn't cry, just stared. A cousin of his, who I remember meeting when we were teenagers, was one of them. She stayed almost 15 minutes sitting with her gaze locked. Then she got up and went to the bathroom, stumbling with her hand on her forehead. Someone went after her. The woman came back with bulging eyes, saying she was having some kind of crisis. I didn't hear everything, but I heard one thing. She said he wouldn't stop looking back, and I thought it was a metaphor, a poetic and somewhat desperate way of dealing with it, but I don't know if it was. I wasn't very comfortable, so I went to walk around the back. There was an old gate, half open, that led to a cracked cement patio. The floor was wet, but it hadn't rained. And there in the corner was a torn garbage bag with mirror shards inside. The first thing that came to mind was why no mirrors if someone brought them. And the second, why did they break them? Time stopped making sense inside there. The ceremony seemed like it wasn't moving. The air didn't change, the smell didn't either. There was a time when the candle went out. Someone else tried to light it, but the match would break. When they managed to relight it, the glass it was in cracked by itself. It was at this point that I felt something there was off, not bad, not heavy, not supernatural. It was a different feeling, like I was inside a place where time was just a repetition of something wrong. I tried not to stare directly at the body. I stayed closer to the wall, looking sideways, but there came a moment when everyone went outside. Coffee, air, I don't know, and I was alone for a few minutes. That's when I looked. It wasn't for long. I just wanted to pay my last respects. But the more I looked, the more his face seemed too quiet. I can't explain it. It wasn't the expression, or the skin tone, or the way they'd arranged him. It was the way the eyes seemed too deep. And then I don't know if it was real, I thought he blinked. My heart stopped, but then I thought, it's my imagination, light reflection, some movement in the eyelid. But then came the part that chokes me to this day. I looked at his face, and for an instant I was sure he was looking at me too. But not him, the person I knew. It was his reflection, the reflection that would be in a mirror, like he was inside glass. The worst part wasn't thinking he blinked. It was realizing that what was there didn't react the same way. I know how this sounds. It seems like invention, like exaggeration. But what broke me was this. When his father came back, I tried to comment, tried to ask if that was normal, if it was all in my head, but he didn't react with surprise or anger. He just looked at me kind of limply and said, "I saw it." First time was in the ambulance rearview mirror, and from then on it was never the same. The sentence came dry, without trying to convince me of anything, like someone carrying a certainty and no longer trying to explain. After that, I couldn't stay much longer. I said I had an early commitment and left. I didn't sleep right for weeks, and even today, so many years later, there's something that won't let me forget. It's not his face, it's the feeling that it didn't stay there, that maybe it left with someone. I was never the same with reflections. I can never stare at myself too long in the bathroom mirror or look at my face in the front camera. Because sometimes when I'm distracted, I see a second face in the background, almost imperceptible, but I know which one it is. It's not mine, and it wasn't his anymore either. It's an image that belongs to nobody, only to the mirror. Since that day, every reflection gives me a chill behind my neck, and every glass with backlighting seems like a chance to see again or be seen. I should have left at the warning, but I wanted to understand, and now there are things I can't unsee anymore. It wasn't the first time I'd done a midnight service. Most of the tense ceremonies happened at that hour. Rain, silence, and few people. The perfect environment for those who just wanted to get it over with quickly. But that request I never forgot. They called late afternoon, saying they needed the small room. Nobody explained the reason properly, just that it was an urgent case, and they wanted everything ready by 10 at night. They arrived with the structure already set up. They only asked for one thing, to put a black chair behind the main structure, against the back wall, facing forward, alone. The woman who called emphasized it. She sat there every day, it was her place. I said fine. Sometimes people ask for symbolic things, empty chair, music she liked, flowers that only she had in her yard. It's not my problem. I just arrange the room, check what needs restocking, and stay nearby to solve any problems. The black chair they asked for was already kind of stored in the warehouse. It was old, good wood, dark, cushioned seat already sunken in. We never used it because it was lower than the others, and whoever sat in it complained that it hurt their back. I took it, cleaned it, left it exactly where they indicated. The structure was already positioned. Brown carpet, fabric flowers, corner lamp, everything set up the standard way, just with that black chair there behind, solitary against the wall, like it was for someone who wasn't going to arrive. The family entered in silence, about 6 in total, 2 sons, a daughter, and 3 companions. One of them looked like a driver. Everyone was dry, wet from the rain, and very quiet. That quietness that doesn't seem like peace, it seems like effort not to collapse. They stayed there looking at the center of the room. The space was clean lit, with no noise except the ceiling fan. I noticed that none of them looked at me, but they all looked at that chair. It wasn't normal. They looked like people who recognize something and like people who fear recognizing it, like they were seeing it again, just at the wrong time. The first strange thing was that nobody sat down. The room was small, but there was space for everyone to be comfortable. Still, they stayed standing. Some leaned against the wall, others just walked slowly. But the chair stayed there. What struck me most was that nobody turned their back to it. Even though they were facing the main structure, you could see they avoided at all costs having their backs turned to the black chair. One of the companions, an older lady with her hair up, very worn face, whispered something near the daughter. The girl just nodded with her head kind of frozen. The lady then said something that caught me right there without meaning to. "She's missing there, isn't she?" The phrase passed like a cutting breeze, like they'd said something wrong, but nobody corrected it. In the middle of the night, I went to the water filter. There was a hose I used to refill the jug, and the sound of running water muffled everything. But even so, I heard it. It was a crack, a dragged sound, wood against the granite floor. The chair. I went to the door. Nobody had touched it, but the angle was different, like someone had adjusted themselves in it and then gotten up. I saw it, I'm sure. I went back to the water fountain, but I couldn't get away from the door anymore. I stayed to the side, pretending to arrange the flower box, just to observe. And then came the part that left me not knowing what to think. In the last half hour of the ceremony, when everyone seemed exhausted, there was someone there. I didn't hear a door, nobody entered, no movement, no footsteps, but there was someone sitting. The chair, which had been alone all night, was occupied. A small figure, drooped shoulders, thin hair, motionless body, like someone who had come back to sit in their usual place. And it was the daughter who noticed. She was kneeling near the center of the room with her eyes down. When she raised her head, she didn't scream, didn't back away. She just slowly turned toward the chair and knelt down. Knelt like someone who knows exactly what they're seeing. Like someone who knew this was going to happen. The older woman who was with them, the one who had spoken before, turned too. She took 2 steps back, not in panic, in respect, like someone giving space. The figure in the chair stayed there, without sound, without reaction, but whole. It was her. Even without knowing her, it was obvious it was her. But the main structure was still there, still occupied. The room went mute, only the ceiling fan made noise. Nobody cried, nobody left. They accepted it. After the end, the space emptied quickly. Nobody wanted to stay to clean up or to thank me. They just passed by me, eyes down, and left, one by one, without saying anything. When I entered the room again, everything was in place except the chair. It was leaning to the side, out of position, like someone had gotten up slowly, but with weight. The weight of someone who's not whole anymore. I took it carefully, took it back to the warehouse. The next night I arrived to open the room. It was another case, another family, people from the countryside. When I entered to start arranging, the black chair was back in the same place, behind the structure, facing forward. And I swear I froze. I stood there staring, went to the warehouse. There was space there. It was clean, empty, no chair missing, but the black one wasn't there anymore. Since then I haven't used it again, and I don't let anyone touch it. Every time we clean the room, it's there alone in the back, and I leave it. I've thought about throwing it away, burning it, locking it up, but I don't, not out of fear, out of understanding. She sat there every day, according to the children. Maybe the body left, but maybe she didn't even notice. Maybe the place is more important than the goodbye. And maybe the body was never the only weight in that structure. Since then, I've never looked at that chair as furniture again. For me, it became a warning. And if one day you go in there and it's facing the wrong way, leave the room. Just leave. I've been working at this gate for a long time, longer than I should have. But that day, I didn't open the gate like always. I was on the inside, sitting with my hand still on my thigh, waiting to see what I already knew was coming. They said it was my foolishness, that it wasn't a curse or prediction. But when you feel something's going to happen, it's not paranoia, it's a warning. And I warned him. I told him not to go, told him with my finger trembling, wrote it on my phone, looking at the streetlight flickering. I said if he went to that birthday party, he wouldn't come back. And he went. He came back the way I didn't want to see him. I didn't cry when I found out, not because it didn't hurt, but because there was a part of me that was just tired, like all of this had happened before. and I was just watching the rerun. I'm a mother and I wasn't there because I asked him not to go. He disobeyed and was carried back. I saw the wheel of the structure getting stuck in the sidewalk hole. I saw the funeral home guy trying to fix the handle. I saw the white cloth covering the lid, and I saw the eyes of those who were with him, who couldn't even look at me. They passed by me, and I was left with what remained of me. That night the wind was wrong. It was the kind of wind that seems to come from inside the earth. It doesn't drag leaves, doesn't move anything, but it enters. It enters through the ears, through the ribs, under the door. I left the door ajar, not for someone to come in, but because it seems like locking too much interferes. Sometimes what's worse isn't someone coming in, it's someone who's already inside. I couldn't leave 2 a.m. It was the first time I heard it. Thud, dry sound, wood being hit from inside out. I froze, but the sound didn't stop. Thud, thud, then silence. But I know that sound. I know it because I've seen bodies turned over, people who wake up startled, animals inside crates. But that wasn't startling, and it wasn't an animal. It was rhythm, it was insistence. It was like someone learning to knock. I stopped at the chamber door. The hallway light was flickering. It wasn't an old bulb, it was the energy of the place itself. That part of the cemetery never worked right. The ground was always kind of crooked, but that corner seems to breathe. I stayed there for a few minutes. My hand was already on the chamber latch, but my fingers wouldn't close. My whole body was screaming, "Don't go in." But my chest was saying, "It's now." And it was inside. It was hot, still heat from something that should be cold but isn't. The cloth was damp, not sweat, it was something else. It was like time had melted on top of it. I went to the structure. The nails weren't deep. It seemed like someone had left the job half done. Or maybe someone inside had pushed back. I took them out one by one, slowly, without courage to make too much noise. When the lid came loose, the cloth slipped to the side and his face appeared. My son or something with his face. He was breathing faintly, but breathing. His eyes were open, but they didn't look, didn't blink. I didn't see fear or pain or relief. I looked at him and thought, if he were sleeping, you could see his soul behind his eyelid. But there was nothing there, it was eyes on the outside and hollow on the inside. And he saw it was me. I'm sure he saw, but he didn't come back. He just existed there. I covered it again, nail by nail, without crying, without hurrying. Because sometimes what kills is the word, and mine had already been said. The next day, nobody commented on anything. I went to my booth, as always, noted the visitor's entry, waved to those who passed, and nobody ever knew I had opened the lid or that he was breathing. I also never told anyone, not because I wanted to hide it, but because there are things that if you say them, they become lies, and I wasn't going to let that become a lie or madness. It was real in the way that only those who were there know. And I was there, but from then on I started hearing things. At night, dragged steps near the fence, breathing by the window, finger tapping on the glass. Just once, never twice, and never on the same night. The lights that flickered started going out, but only when I open the door from inside, everything shines. When I step outside, they die. I thought it might just be the old post, but then I saw. On the Wednesday after, it was almost midnight. I was finishing washing my lunch container. I raised my face, and there was someone standing outside at the cemetery entrance. Didn't move, didn't sit, didn't wave, just standing with the body kind of crooked, like one side still knew how to walk, but the other had stayed stuck in the place where he fell. And he didn't blink. That's when that look came to me, the same one I saw inside the structure. I tried to close the curtain, but it was like he had already entered before I even pulled the fabric. That night I lay with my eyes open, and he stayed outside, or maybe he was already inside. It doesn't matter anymore. Since then I continue, I work, I sweep, I write down names, I check who enters, who leaves, nobody suspects, nobody notices. But sometimes when someone new arrives, I pay attention. There's always a moment, always just a second before the body goes down, when it seems like everything holds its breath, like the ground itself wants to ask, "Are you sure?" And I stay there watching, waiting to see if I'll hear the sound. That sound hasn't happened again until now, but I know that one day it will, because what I heard that night wasn't just him. It was like a call, like an echo, like others had learned too. Today I'm still there, door ajar, shoes by the bed, key always turned just halfway. And once in a while, when the wind comes in strange, when the sky stands still and not even the dogs bark, I feel like he's coming, or that he's already back, but not for me, not for home. He came back to the place that became his, to the cemetery, to the edge of the post, to the chamber window, and he doesn't hate me or love me. He just stayed with the part of him that never knew how to come back. And I stayed with the part that's left, that listens, that waits, that knows. Because after you bury someone wrong, you also die along with them, just standing up. They talk a lot nowadays about restless spirits, those things that appear in footage, shadows in the corner of your eye, but what nobody prepares you for is the silence, the stopped time, the fire that doesn't go out when it should. I've prayed wakes for 36 years. 36. I made a promise as a boy to help souls find rest. It was something my grandmother did, and she always said, "For a soul to go in peace, it needs light and the right word. If you get it wrong, it stays." But there was one day when the right word wasn't enough. It was in a simple house, one of those with old wooden doors that creak, in a remote community between Phoenix and Tucson. The woman who passed was called Linda, 40 years old. She had a reputation as a healer, but also for messing with things she shouldn't. She died quickly, that's what they said. Nobody explained it well. They just said she fell hard in the yard and they called the ambulance, but it was too late. When they called me to pray, the family was divided. There was a sister who didn't even enter the house. She stayed in the back in the dark, with her arms crossed. The house was cramped, but it smelled of fresh death, low ceiling, walls with humidity, and the body there in the living room in the raw wood casket, against the wall of portraits. At the head of the casket they left a candle, just one, white, one of those thick, pure wax ones. I lit it with a steady hand. I spoke the first psalms. The candle burned normally, but it didn't last even 5 minutes. The fire went out all at once. There was no wind. The window was only cracked and didn't even make a draft. I stayed quiet. I struck the match, lit it again. I prayed some more. It went out again, just that one. The kitchen ones were steady. Then I started paying attention to the time, to the way of the candle. The wax wasn't even melted. It was like the fire gave up on its own. The third time I relit it, I heard someone behind me whispering, "It's not the candle, it's a warning." I pretended I didn't hear it. Because in those times, if you give space, fear enters. I continued the prayer, even with my throat stuck, but I already knew. The candle was saying there was something there that hadn't been resolved. And that's when I made the mistake, a mistake I never forgive myself for. I asked everyone to leave for a bit. I said I wanted to stay in private prayer, a soul prayer alone, and I stayed there alone with her. Her, the woman in the casket. The candle had gone out again. But before I lit another one, it relit itself, without a match, without a lighter, nothing. The wick lit itself, and the flame stayed straight, alive, without tremor, like someone had blown life back into it. That's when I saw it. Her eyes were open, not wide, not stiff, open, calm, living eyes in a body that had been cold for over 8 hours. And then she spoke with her mouth barely moving, like someone blowing a secret so as not to be heard. The soul isn't mine yet. I swear by a strand of my mother's hair. That's what I heard. The moment she said that the soul isn't mine yet, the candle's heat came straight to my face. But the cold came from inside. It was just a second. She closed her eyes right after, like she'd said what she needed to. Done, she went back to the silence of the body. But the fire didn't go out anymore. It stayed lit, steady. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't a feeling. It wasn't an impression. I looked at the window, and outside there was a presence standing. I didn't see a face or defined form, but I saw the large shadow, bent, shoulders too wide for the body. That thing there wasn't from the family, and it wasn't from this world either. It seemed like someone waiting, observing, like someone who came to fetch, but couldn't yet. The candle flame even crackled lightly, like it was nervous. That's when I spoke low, just to myself. This isn't for me. I went to the front door, unlocked it, and called back those who were outside the house. I said they could continue the vigil, but nobody wanted to stay anymore, not even blood relatives. The sister, who was in the back, shook her head, repeating, "This causes trouble. This causes trouble." I didn't go back near the casket. I stayed outside, on the edge of the yard, just watching the window with the candle lit inside, and it didn't go out anymore. Until burial time, that damn candle burned like nothing had happened. But what really burned was something else, because anyone who understands candles knows. When it goes out by itself 3 times, it's a warning. When it relights, it's a message. But when it speaks with a dead person's voice, it's because the soul wasn't resolved. And if it wasn't resolved, it wasn't my business anymore. Since that day, I never accepted another invitation to pray awake. I put away my ribbons, my books, my candles. People still look for me, especially old country folks who trust my prayer, but I refuse with respect. There are rituals that shouldn't be done without certainty, and I don't have it anymore because whatever was there in that room, that night, wasn't just sadness, it was a dispute. It was someone wanting to pull that soul back or someone not letting it go. And I don't know which one won. The only thing I know is that at that moment the fire spoke more than any prayer, and her phrase stayed in my head until today. Sometimes, when I'm alone at home and the light flickers, I hear it again, almost whispered like that night. The soul isn't mine yet, and I understand. There are souls that are still being disputed, and it's not up to me anymore to decide which side it will go to. Now, when someone dies around here, I only light a candle when I'm sure it will go out by itself. Because fire that insists is a soul that doesn't want to go. Or worse, it's a soul that hasn't even become hers yet. If you made it this far, it's because this story caught you. So take advantage and subscribe to the Terror Diary channel. Hit the bell and leave a like. This helps a lot to keep bringing real stories like this one. Here, the listeners are in charge. Each story is told as it was lived. No exaggeration, no invention, just terror as it happens in real life. If you have a story you never had the courage to tell, this is the right place. See you in the next one. The stretch between Flagstaff and Sedona is rough, nothing but hills, tight curves, narrow lanes, and when you're hauling a full load, you feel every pound pulling you toward the guardrail. It was on that section I heard the first strange crack. Not the kind of noise you ignore. It sounded like something heavy had shifted inside. But my cargo was all plastic drums, and what I heard was more like metal scraping against the trailer floor. I figured it was just my imagination, but then came the second noise, louder this time, like something was sliding around and hitting the back wall of the trailer. Speed was low because of the grade, and I was alone on the highway. I pulled into a turnout and grabbed my flashlight. Nobody else around, and the trailer was still sealed, so I just opened the top hatch where I could shine the light in. The drums were right where they should be, all strapped down tight. But there was a space at the back that shouldn't have been there, like someone had built a false wall. The paint job was identical. That same matte aluminum finish even had grime on it, like it was part of the original trailer structure. But looking closer, I could see fresh paint around some screws, and there was a different smell coming from back there too, like melted plastic, not the cleaning products I was supposed to be hauling. I stood there for a few seconds with the flashlight shaking in my hand, alone on that mountain road, trying to figure out what I'd agreed to transport. I thought about just continuing on, pretending I hadn't seen anything, but that noise kept echoing in my head. I went back to the cab, called the dispatch number, and told them I was turning around. Made up some story about the engine overheating, didn't give details, just said I wasn't making the delivery. The dispatcher went quiet for a few seconds, then said real calm, "All right, sir. Drive safe coming back." That calmness bothered me more than if they'd started yelling. I headed back to base that same day without touching anything else. Turned in the truck with everything still sealed and walked away with this sick feeling in my stomach. Next morning, I got a text from a number I'd never seen before. "You didn't see anything. Keep it quiet." No name, just that. I deleted it right away, but it stuck with me like a splinter, felt like someone was watching me. A few days later, I logged into the company system to check my trip history. We have access through the driver portal to verify fuel averages, stops, speed, that kind of thing. But the stops I'd made weren't showing up. The first one in Winslow, where I'd rested for 20 minutes. The second at the turnout, where I heard the noises and checked the cargo, nothing. The system showed it like I'd driven straight through from Phoenix to base without stopping. Even stranger, the GPS tracker only picked up signal again when I was already heading back. I talked to a buddy I trust, and he whispered to me, "There's routes out there that get messed with. People who can erase sections, delete stops, change the map however they want." The pieces fell into place with a bitter taste. Week after that, someone showed up at my house. I live with my wife in a quiet neighborhood in Tucson. It was a thin guy, light-colored dress shirt, hair neatly combed. Said he was from the company, but wasn't wearing a badge and didn't arrive in a company vehicle. Talked real calm, smiling the whole time, but his manner was what scared me most, too steady, too rehearsed. He said last week's freight was company confidential, and that it had been a misunderstanding for me to turn back with the load. Ended by saying that if he were in my position, he'd think carefully before making any kind of comments, because sometimes a person can lose more than just their job. This man knew my name, knew where I lived, knew my wife was inside the house at that moment, and never even raised his voice to threaten me. After he left, I sat on the couch with the TV remote in my hand for over an hour, couldn't press a single button. It wasn't anger. It was this mix of helplessness and fear of having become a piece in a game I didn't even know I was playing. That night I put in my notice. Didn't leave room for discussion, said I needed to take care of a sick relative and had to stay home. They offered me another truck, offered me a raise. I just thanked them and left. Since then, I only take direct freight with people I trust. Even so, I check the cargo 3 times before closing the door, and that's not an exaggeration. What I saw back there was designed to fool even someone who lives on the road. It took about 2 weeks before I could sleep right again. Wasn't insomnia, it was that kind of fear that doesn't need noise or shadows. Just the certainty that someone's watching you even when you can't see anybody. Every time I went out with the new truck, felt like something was behind me. Any car parked on the shoulder made me look twice, 3 times. There was one day near Gallup where a white Corolla followed me for almost 40 minutes. I'd change lanes, it would change too. Only stopped when I pulled into a truck stop and stayed there until dark. Might sound like paranoia, but once you've had your life in someone else's hands without knowing it, you don't doubt anything anymore. After I left the company, I was never called by name at weigh stations again. But on that last trip, right after the scales, the booth operator looked straight at me and said, "You're good to go, the bracelet's already in the system." I had no idea what he was talking about, no bracelet, no system. I just thanked him and kept driving, but it kept gnawing at me. I even started thinking I'd misunderstood until I saw the bracelet. It was hanging from the side door handle of the trailer paper, like those event wristbands, with a number printed on it and a barcode. The weird part was, there was no way it could have been there. I'd locked up the truck alone, checked everything. But someone had hung it there afterward, someone who knew where I was going to be. Maybe it was that system the booth guy mentioned. Maybe it was someone from the company. I have no idea, but that bracelet became one of the worst signs I ever got on the road. I talked to another trucker at a stop in Flagstaff, an older guy who'd been around, worked everywhere. Mentioned casually, without giving myself away, that I'd seen something weird hanging on my door. He lowered his voice and said, "Some places mark the truck without you knowing. Sometimes it's for tracking. Sometimes it's for another crew to pick up down the line." Since that day, I never go through a weigh station without getting out and checking everything. People think truckers live alone because we like it, but the truth is, there's routes where it's better to stay quiet without anyone around, because what's at stake isn't just the freight. It's what they put in your truck without you knowing, and what they can take from you afterward. Months later, I got one last call. Private number. I answered thinking it might be a customer since I'd posted availability for private freight in the group, but it was the same voice from the visit to my house, measured, polite, and dry. He said, "You already understand how it works. What's not yours doesn't need to be touched. Stay in your lane and the road will give you back your peace." And he hung up. That was the last time anyone from all that contacted me. I never reported it, never went to the police. Didn't even tell my brother, who's also a trucker, the details. But sometimes when I stop to sleep and hear a solid thump coming from the trailer, my heart still races. Because now I know the worst thing on the road isn't accidents or loneliness. It's carrying stuff you don't know about, being part of something you never signed up for, being responsible for a crime you didn't commit. On the road, everyone says they trust the bill of lading, the GPS tracker, the seal. But what I learned is that all of that can just be window dressing. You can be used, marked, followed without realizing it. And the most dangerous part is when things go wrong, the blame goes straight to whoever's name is on the wheel. Nobody else shows up. Today I only haul what I've personally watched being loaded, and if someone takes offense to that, too bad. The road charges a high price from those who try to do right. I don't know what that was. I just know it was inside my truck, and if the cops had stopped me, I would have been the one going to jail, not whoever hid it. I've hauled freight up and down this country, but there's one delivery that still locks me up inside, and look, nothing actually happened on paper. But the way it almost happened, that's what tore me apart. It all started with a Venmo payment. I won't lie. When I saw the amount hit my account, I smiled. It was too good to turn down. Light cargo, short haul, rural route between Cedar Rapids and Waterloo. What caught my attention was the payment was above normal, but not so crazy it seemed like a scam. Came through a freight group I'd been in for years. Most people there are solid colleagues who help each other out when loads are short or heavy. The post even had a photo from a trucker I knew, which gave me another reason to trust it. Profile said he was tight on time and needed someone to pick up some disassembled steel framework, that's all. Just pull up, grab the pieces, and haul them to the next town over. Payment was up front. Venmo processed the minute it posted. Soon as the payment cleared, he sent me the address. When I plugged the location into my GPS, I felt uneasy right away. The road was dirt, long, with several stretches where there was no cell signal. The entrance was after a sharp curve, the kind that looks like it's going nowhere. But I didn't worry too much. The area has plenty of farms and half-abandoned homesteads. Figured it was just another simple property. I got there around 3 in the afternoon. Sky was clear, but the sun was already starting to drop behind the hills, that yellow light that makes everything look still and strange. The entrance was a wire gate, one of those makeshift ones with weeds growing up through it, tall and closed off with twisted wire. I stopped the truck, got out, opened it with some effort. No signs, no indication of activity. When I drove in, the dirt track led me to a house that looked abandoned. Crooked roof, faded paint, weeds had grown up to the porch steps. But the door was cracked open. Not wide open, just a gap. Right then I froze, stood there for about 3 seconds on the cab step. That left me with a weird unease, because if the house was really abandoned, the door should have been closed tight or hanging wide open. But cracked like that seemed intentional. I honked twice. Nobody answered. Called out loud, identified myself, said I was the driver. Silence. I got down slow, and that's when I realized something else. My phone had no signal. Completely dead, not even emergency bars. I went back to the truck, climbed up again, turned off the engine, and rolled down the window. Stayed there listening. You could only hear the brush moving in the wind and occasionally what sounded like a roof tile creaking. Then I heard footsteps. Not an animal, not wind people. 2 or 3 steps, then they stopped, like whoever was inside had frozen when they heard me call out. The silence after that was worse than any noise. I'm not ashamed to say I froze again. It wasn't fear, it was instinct, that thing that comes from inside that doesn't need explaining. I knew someone was in there, and that person was waiting for me. But not to talk, not for any cargo. I went back to the truck, walking backwards slowly, and when I got up I didn't start the engine. I went straight into reverse. The track was narrow, but I didn't care about brush or fence or anything. I just wanted out. That's when I turned the wheel and saw in the middle of the curve where I'd come from, a car parked sideways, facing me. Couldn't see the make. It was sideways like it had taken the curve and stopped there on purpose. I'll never forget the way it was positioned, like it wanted to block the exit. I didn't stop to think. I threw the truck to the side, into the brush. The trailer side scraped branches, the front clipped a tree, but I got through. And when I hit the main road again with my heart pounding and the wheel shaking, that's when I floored it. Didn't look back, and even with the signal coming back to my phone about 15 minutes later, I didn't call anyone right away. I stayed quiet for several miles, trying to understand what I just escaped. I only stopped when I was almost in Waterloo, pulled into a truck stop, ordered black coffee. Sat there with the cup in my hand for 10 minutes before taking the first sip. I was sweating without understanding why, like I'd run a marathon, but my body knew. My body felt it before my mind understood. That's when I picked up my phone again and opened the freight group. The ad was still there, but the profile that had posted it was gone. Clicked on the photo and got user not found. I made a post in the group asking if anyone else had taken that freight. That's when the reports started coming in. One guy said he'd gotten the same Venmo payment 2 weeks ago, but the address was different, also in a rural area. Said when he got there, the gate was open and the house had lights on, but nobody came out to meet him. He left before getting out of the truck. Another one said the same number had offered him similar freight, but disappeared after he asked for a video of the cargo. Then came the worst one. A colleague from another group I don't know personally said a buddy of his had taken this freight and never came back. Disappeared with the truck. Police found the vehicle abandoned on a dirt road in rural Illinois. No cargo, no sign of the driver. That's when it clicked. That Venmo payment wasn't payment, it was bait. The idea was simple: catch the trucker through trust, through routine, through exhaustion. A group with a known name, a number with a local area code, a profile with another driver's photo. Everything lined up perfectly. And the setting, rural area, no neighbors nearby, no cell signal. A place where a person could disappear, and nobody would hear any screaming. The house wasn't abandoned. That cracked door had been opened by someone. The footsteps I heard weren't my imagination. And that car at the end of the curve, it wasn't there by accident. Maybe there were more people involved. Maybe they were just waiting for me to walk in, just to take one wrong step. I kept thinking about it for days. I'd try to sleep and remember the sound of those footsteps stopping. The silence that came after silence, so heavy it felt like someone was holding their breath with me. I told my wife about it, but I left out details. Didn't want to worry her. Said I'd been called for weird freight and thought it was better to turn it down. But inside, I knew I'd escaped by seconds, by instinct, by that unease that froze me at the truck door. After that, I changed a lot of things. First, I don't take Venmo from numbers I don't know, no matter how good the rate. Good freight that's too good is a trap. Second, now I ask for a video call or at least a photo with ID. If they won't send it, I don't even respond. Third, when the location is too remote, I warn someone ahead of time. Send the location. Leave everything written down. You don't realize it, but one slip-up is all it takes. Sometimes a person thinks they're just doing the basics, taking a job, picking up cargo, solving the day's problems, and deep down they're being led straight into trouble, straight into the bottom of the hole. I never trusted easy freight again. And every time I see the sun starting to set on the side of the highway, I remember that house, that cracked door, the sound of someone waiting in the dark. Because if I'd gotten out, maybe today someone would be finding my truck with the door open, just like I found that house. And the worst part, with nobody to explain what had happened. If there's one thing I've learned after 30+ years on the road, it's that danger doesn't always come running at you with a gun. Sometimes it comes crying, and that's where the real poison is. It was a cold pre-dawn, one of those stops where even the asphalt seems to be sleeping. I'd pulled into a small truck stop on I-95, down toward the South Carolina border near the Georgia line. I was going to grab coffee, wash my face, breathe a little before continuing the haul. The place was empty. Just the sleepy attendant and an old man adjusting his load tarp on the other side of the lot. I went into the diner and ordered that bitter coffee just to shake off the fatigue. That's when she appeared, came walking fast, kind of stumbling like someone running from something. Simple clothes, loose hair, swollen face. What got me was the way she cried, not making a scene, not loud. But this quiet crying with her breath catching, like someone who didn't have the strength left to ask for help properly. She stopped near my table and asked if I was heading toward Georgia. Said she needed to get out of there, that her husband was dangerous, that she'd escaped from his house, that she was scared to go back and not come out alive. Used those exact words. And she was shaking in a way that made my hand itch to help. My mistake was wanting to help. I told her I was passing through that way, but I could only drop her at the next truck stop, about 20 minutes ahead. She accepted right away, thanked me so much it made me uncomfortable. Before getting in, she asked if she could ride in the sleeper, said she felt safer back there. I thought it was strange, but let her. During the drive, she started letting the words out slowly, like someone spitting up pain. Talked low, slow, and I couldn't even look at her properly in the rearview mirror. Said the husband drank, that he hit her, that he threatened to kill her. Even showed me some bruises on her arm. I listened with my own eyes, but now I wonder if it wasn't makeup. We stopped at a simple truck stop, well known among drivers. It was about 3 a.m, maybe later. I parked the truck, turned off the engine, and told her I was going to the restroom too. She went ahead and never came back. I waited 15 minutes, then 30, then an hour. Nothing. I went to the cashier and asked if she'd seen the woman. Said yes, that she'd gone into the bathroom and then come out with a backpack, crossed the highway, and disappeared toward the bus stop. I went back to the truck confused, kind of irritated, but what could I do? I kept driving. But I'd barely been on the road for 40 minutes when I saw the flashing lights. The state trooper pulled me over hard, like I'd been fleeing something. I got out with my blood pressure through the roof. It was two officers, firm. One of them made me pull over and show my documents. The other went straight to the truck. They said they'd received an anonymous tip that I was with a woman under threat, that she'd been taken against her will. I went cold. I said it was a lie, told them everything detail by detail, showed them that she'd asked for the ride, that I'd only dropped her at the truck stop. But it didn't help. The officer who'd gone into the truck came back with a different look on his face. In his hands, two plastic packages, badly wrapped, dirty with dust. Found them behind the passenger seat. Suspicious substance. Their look changed immediately. I tried to explain, tried to say I'd never seen that it wasn't mine, that I didn't transport anything off the manifest. But there in the middle of the highway at dawn, you don't have much chance of being heard. They cuffed me, took me to the nearest station. I didn't even know what to say. I just thought about my wife, my kids, my boss who was going to hear about the bomb on the radio before hearing from me. Thought about all the clients who trusted me, the deliveries I made on time, always within deadline. And there I was, sleeping in a cold cell, treated like a suspect, like a transporter of bad stuff, because of a woman who cried too prettily to be real. It took 2 days to access the truck stop's camera footage. 2 days. When they pulled the recordings, they saw everything, her getting out of the truck alone, buying a bus ticket at the counter, laughing with the cashier, and leaving through the side exit. It was all a setup. She'd planted those packages in my truck. She'd chosen me, used me, knew nobody would suspect a woman in distress. Knew a trucker giving her a ride would be the perfect fall guy. And I was. Even after they proved I wasn't guilty, that I'd been tricked, the stain stuck. Some clients never spoke to me again. Some people in my own family got uncomfortable. I had to show papers, reports, lab results to be looked in the eye again. These days, if I see someone on the side of the road crying and begging, I pray for them silently and keep driving. Because what that woman did to me almost ended my life. They released me on a muggy morning, no apology, no conversation, not even looking me in the eye. The detective just said, there was a reversal in the case. You can go. Reversal, that's the word he used, like I'd won a prize and hadn't spent the worst nights of my life in a dirty cell, scared of being beaten for a story that wasn't mine. Nobody was waiting for me outside. The truck was still impounded, and I didn't even have my phone because they'd collected everything when I was arrested. Had to borrow a phone to call my wife, and even she, who's known me for over 20 years, answered with a shaky voice. I know she trusted me, but the scare was bigger. I went back to work weeks later, but never the same way. Before, I handled high-value deliveries, cargo that required trust. After what happened, they put me on short routes, light freight, generic cargo. The boss didn't say anything directly, but I felt it. It was distrust, fear of associating the company name with a trucker involved in a poorly explained case. Some clients who'd known me for years cut contact overnight. Some colleagues started looking at me sideways in the yard, whispering to each other. And every time I saw a police car on the highway, my stomach would turn. I started wondering if it was just me, if others had been through this. I started pulling conversations at truck stops, asking discreetly, and that's when I heard 1 or 2 similar stories. Trucker who gave a ride and was accused of carrying bad stuff. Driver who picked up a teenager on the shoulder and found himself mixed up with stolen parts. The difference was in my case, it had all been calculated. She'd chosen a trucker alone at dawn at a small truck stop. Chose the perfect drama, the right script, the most convincing tone of voice. Put the packages in the back seat while I was in the bathroom or maybe distracted at the diner. Used my own sense of humanity against me. The police never said anything more, never found her, didn't even try to tell the truth. They say she got on a bus to Atlanta that same dawn, disappeared in the middle of the world. But I don't doubt she did it again with someone else, because someone who sets up something like that doesn't do it just once. I wanted to keep this story quiet, buried, but after I saw so many truckers being used as shields, as scapegoats, I decided to tell it. It's not for me, it's for whoever's on the road now, listening to this story on the radio or phone, thinking it's an exaggeration. It's not. There are people who will use your good heart to bury your life. After what I went through, I changed. Today I lock the truck even to go to the bathroom. Don't talk to anyone through the window. Don't let anyone get in, no matter how desperate they seem. Woman, man, child, doesn't matter. Because in the end, if things go wrong, nobody's going to look at the person's desperation. They're going to look at you. And you're the one who's going to be handcuffed. You're the one who's going to have your name marked. Once, long after all this, I pulled into a highway truck stop farther south and saw a scene that gave me chills. A woman about the same age as that other one, almost the same appearance, leaning against another trucker's window, crying. He opened the door for her to get in. I didn't do anything, just watched from a distance. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. But I can't separate them anymore. And the worst part is that she looked at me like she knew, like she remembered, like she'd done it to me before. I know it sounds impossible, but in that moment, I felt the same sensation I felt the day I found her in the diner. That's when I realized it wasn't just her body that disappeared fast. It was the guilt too. Today, I drive the highway with a harder heart, and not out of meanness, but because this story taught me that on the road, whoever cries the loudest sometimes carries the dirtiest plan. I was stupid, yes, but never a criminal. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that trying to help someone on the road can end your life overnight, just like that. I was hauling pharmaceuticals from Albany to Hartford, a route I know with my eyes closed. I've always been careful because I know pharmacy loads, especially controlled substances, attract the wrong kind of people. But that day, it wasn't the freight that worried me. It was the way they marked me, and I didn't even notice at first. When you've been running the same highway for a long time, any detail that's different screams in the back of your head. Could be a car parked where there usually isn't one, a person standing in a strange place, or a toll booth operator with a wristband in their hand. It was right there on I-84 after Springfield. Everything was normal until I got to the toll plaza. I paid with the company card like always, and the guy offered me a little express access bracelet. Said it was to speed up company verification, that the QR code on the bracelet matched the truck data to avoid lines and speed up inspection up ahead. I'm not picky about that stuff, and it seemed like something new companies trying to modernize their systems. I put it on my wrist and kept driving. But it was only about 15 minutes later that I started noticing things were off. Right after the toll booth, there was a silver car parked on the shoulder. Nothing unusual about that, but when I was passing slowly by it, I saw the passenger had their arm out the window, holding their phone right at my arm, like they were filming my wrist. And more than that, the focus wasn't on the truck. It was on me, on my arm. Right then I thought, maybe these people are really monitoring like the toll guy said. But something was wrong. It wasn't company people or highway authority. It was a regular car, civilian plates, and the person filming wasn't wearing a uniform. The driver didn't even look at me. They just sat there waiting, with the phone pointed at me. I kept driving, but the thought kept gnawing at me. The highway was empty, and I was listening more carefully than usual. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a white car coming up fast from behind, got close and stuck behind me, started flashing their lights. First I thought they wanted to pass. I slowed down a little, moved toward the shoulder. They didn't pass. I signaled, got back in the lane. They stayed glued to me. That's when another car, a black sedan, pulled up beside me on the left. I looked over and the window was closed, but the guy was staring at me. Just staring, didn't even blink. The two of them kept switching positions behind me for a while. One would stick close, the other would pass, then they'd reverse. That squeezed my chest in a way I don't like to feel. This wasn't traffic, wasn't an accident. This was marking. Someone telling me without words that they knew who I was and what I was carrying. Sure enough, at mile marker 763, there's a little dirt road that cuts off the main highway. I'd used that route before when I did freight to a farm in the area. It's an old road, poorly marked, but it makes a loop and comes out way up ahead. I didn't think twice, threw the truck right and took it. Both cars kept going straight. It was only when I stopped later to catch my breath at a roadside tire shop that I understood what was happening. The tire guy came to help me and saw the bracelet on my wrist. His face froze immediately. He didn't even want to know about the tire. "You got that bracelet on there. Rip that thing off right now. I've had 3 guys come through here with those, and they all got boxed in after that toll booth." I ripped it off immediately. Don't even know where I threw it. It wasn't company monitoring. It was monitoring by people who use the system to mark truckers. Silent, cold, no direct approach. They just watch, wait, and come after you when you think you're alone. The worst part, I'd allowed it. After that conversation at the tire shop, I sat for several minutes inside the cab, not moving. It wasn't just anger, it was this mix of shame and shock, because I'd been thinking it was just happening to me, but apparently it wasn't. They'd tried this with others before, and now they were trying it on me. On the road, danger doesn't always come screaming. Sometimes it just watches, marks you in a way that seems normal, a sticker, a bracelet, a code, and by the time you realize it, someone's already waiting around the next curve. That day I was lucky I diverted, but what if I'd kept going straight? What if I didn't know that dirt road? Those 2 cars knew what they were doing and were sure I'd fall for it too. It was all very organized, very clean. No violence, no approach, just marking. After that, I went back on the highway with a different mindset. I started noticing every parked car, every strange movement. And the more I thought about it, the more things clicked. I remembered news I'd seen before in a trucker group. 3 drivers robbed in sequence on the same stretch of I-84, all carrying controlled substances. No cameras caught the moment of the robbery, and here's another detail. They'd all passed through the same toll booth at the same time. Very similar to mine. I also remembered a conversation at a truck stop in Waterbury. A guy mentioned half-jokingly that now the cargo people don't even need to follow trucks anymore. They just plant a tracker at the toll booth. At the time, nobody paid attention, but now that was hammering in my head. That's when it really clicked. These little bracelets weren't from any company. They weren't for logistical control. They were a type of tracking, not electronic, but dumb. That's exactly why it was harder to detect. A color, a shape, a way to visually mark the driver. Someone would see it, write it down or film it, and boom, they already knew who to follow. And maybe it wasn't just my case. Maybe there was someone inside too, someone in the system who said which cargo was worth marking. Infiltrated people, or even people who worked there, getting paid on the side. I know it sounds like a movie, but anyone who lives on the road knows evil doesn't show up with a mask. It doesn't point a gun or yell. It just sits there quietly in the toll booth line with a sticker on the windshield or a bracelet on the wrist. From that day on, I changed a lot. I never accept QR codes for monitoring, bracelets, or little tags again. If they tell me it's to make things easier, I get suspicious. I started stopping at different places, off the traditional route. I avoid sleeping at the same points, and mainly I stopped trusting kindness that comes out of nowhere. Because it wasn't just fear of robbery, it was fear of being watched, of someone somewhere knowing where you are without you knowing about it. Have you ever wondered how many drivers didn't have time to realize they were being followed? How many thought it was just another trip and ended up boxed in? The marking happens in silence. That's what scares me most. These days I told this to a route colleague. He laughed, said I was seeing things. But 2 days later he called me, said he'd also seen the same type of bracelet and a car parked on the shoulder filming. He took off the bracelet before even leaving the toll booth. Lucky for him. I keep driving, but now with my eye on everything, and with the certainty that if they want to mark you, they don't even need to touch you. They just need you to accept it. It wasn't the road that scared me, it was the silence. The silence of people who already knew I was coming, and were just waiting for the right moment to close in behind me. I've woken up with the truck shaking from strong winds, with a blown tire in the middle of nowhere, even with people trying to break into the cab in the middle of the night. But none of those times left me the way I was left that day. It was a Thursday, end of the month. I was pulling a load of electronics from Los Angeles to Phoenix, everything legal, everything documented. New truck, company GPS active, trailer sealed, paperwork straight. It was getting dark when the engine started showing signs of overheating. I had maybe an hour before I planned to stop where I wanted, but the temperature gauge didn't lie. The radiator fan was making a weird noise too. I could have pushed it, but I preferred not to risk it. I saw a small truck stop on the right after a poorly marked interchange. It was in the middle of the stretch between Quartzsite and Wickenburg, right there on US 93. Pretty empty, not much traffic. I pulled in, left the engine running to cool down slowly, and got out. First thing I noticed was the silence. No other trucks, no cars fueling up. Just the attendant inside the store watching TV on his phone, and next to the pump, a guy sitting on a low wall with his arms crossed, like he was already waiting for something. I went to the front of the truck, popped the hood, and squatted down. I was trying to figure out where the noise was coming from when I heard his voice behind me. Said he'd driven this same model before, and that noise was common, probably just the expansion valve breathing. He talked calm, sure. Guy was in his early 40s, light polo shirt, trimmed beard, smelled like strong deodorant. I thanked him for the tip, kind of suspicious, but he didn't push anything. Said he could take a look if I wanted, that he worked in maintenance and hung around there a lot. I figured maybe he was from the area, so I let him. He messed with the engine for a few minutes, commented on the oil level, then went to a thermos of his and asked if I wanted some coffee. I accepted. Honestly, up to that point, he seemed more helpful than intrusive. The coffee taste was bitter strong, but I drank it fast. Must have been around 9 o'clock. I remember looking at the cab clock before getting out. And then it just ended. No nausea, no strange feeling, no tingling. Last thing I remember clearly was setting the cup down on the tank step and saying, "Thanks, brother." After that, nothing. When I opened my eyes, there was bright sun beating down on my face. First sensation was pain in my shoulder, like I'd slept wrong. Second was the brush. I was lying on my side in the middle of tall grass, weeds cutting my arm, shirt torn in the back, dirty and wet with dew. And worst of all, no truck, no phone, no wallet, just my body. It took me a while to understand if it was a dream or a breakdown. I started getting up slowly, feeling pain in my knees and lower back. The desperation came when I realized I had no idea where I was. Just dirt road in one direction, farmland in the other. No car noise, nothing. I tried walking in a straight line, following the sun, until I found something, anything. It was almost 2 hours of walking before I saw a wire fence. I crossed it and found a paved road, still not knowing which way to go. I started walking along the white line of the shoulder, feeling like a crazy person. A small car stopped, thank God, an older man and his wife. When I told them I was a trucker and needed to get to a police station, they took me to a highway patrol post. I explained everything to the sergeant who helped me. The man looked at me like I was dreaming, asked if I'd been drinking or taking controlled medication. I asked them to come with me to the truck stop where I'd stopped, and they did. But when the patrol car pulled into the lot, something didn't add up. It looked like the same place, simple pump, faded sign, small store. But the first thing I noticed was there was nobody like the guy who'd offered to help me. The attendant denied having seen anyone matching the description I gave. Said the cameras had been down for weeks and that I'd probably stopped somewhere else, gotten confused. I insisted, showed him the route section, said the exact time. I asked them to check anything. And then came what chilled me most. One of the truck stop's cameras showed the lot it had recorded the night before, but the recording stopped around 8:50, right when I'd arrived. System problem, they said. Coincidence. But I felt right away it wasn't. It was like I'd been erased from the route, from the map, from the radar. After the frustrating visit to the truck stop, I was taken back to the station to file a report. I told them everything: company name, truck plate, cargo type, details about the guy who'd offered help, even the coffee brand if I had to. The officer wrote it all down calmly, but with that look, the one that says this is going to die in the drawer. When I mentioned the camera that stopped recording right when I parked, he closed up. Said it happened more than you'd think, old systems, owners don't want to invest, and so on. I asked them to use the truck's GPS. The company had real-time location access. I called the fleet manager. He got more nervous than me. Said the system showed the last registered point exactly there at the truck stop, then nothing. like the GPS had been ripped out or shut down by force. The cargo was heavy boxes of new laptops, phones, electronic accessories, high-end stuff. The route was considered safe, no specific alerts for that stretch. I'd only stopped because the engine showed signs of overheating. And that's when it starts hammering the doubt. Was the engine sabotaged beforehand? Was the problem part of the plan? It was days without answers. The company gave me assistance for the first 2 days, then silence. I started feeling like I was the problem, like they were trying to hold me responsible. They came with loaded questions. Are you sure you didn't know the guy? Do you have any history of involvement with illegal products? Why did you accept the coffee? Like I'd set it up myself. The insurance claimed that since the vehicle was under my possession and there was no record of robbery with material evidence, the fault could fall on me. The investigation stalled. No suspects identified, no truck leads, no cargo trail. And most absurd, nobody from the truck stop showed up in the footage after that. There was no camera in the back or at the side pumps. The only one that existed had an error right on time. A very convenient error. I started wondering if the attendant was also part of it, or if that guy was a truck stop employee in disguise, or if there was someone else watching everything from a distance, waiting for the right moment to erase me. I had to go home on foot from the station after 2 days stuck in town without money, phone, or dignity. A trucker who'd lost everything but was still standing. The trailer was financed. I was halfway through the payments. I lost the contract, got cut from the company, and even without being at fault, I still had to give explanations to the police, family, insurance, God, and the world. The hardest part, nobody asked the questions that mattered. Nobody asked if I was okay, if I was sleeping right, if I could close my eyes without remembering the feeling of waking up dumped in the brush with the taste of coffee in my mouth and no ground to stand on. I started avoiding small truck stops after that, then big ones too. I'd only stop in truck lines, close to other colleagues. Even so, I'd sleep with my phone hidden in my clothes and the truck key wrapped in a cloth inside my boot. Every time someone came to make conversation saying they understood mechanics, I'd make up that the truck was rented, that the engine had already been worked on at the dealership. I'd make up stories, lie, change the subject. Trust became a luxury. Peace became a memory. To this day, I can't explain what scared me most, if it was how easily everything disappeared, or how everything was silenced afterward. No news report, no company alert, no official statement. The most I got was a generic email from the company saying they regretted what happened and would evaluate my future record. Today I work regional freight, short hauls, safe routes. I don't have the trailer anymore, don't have complete equipment, but I also don't have any illusions. There are people who die on the road. I was just buried standing up. They left me alive but erased my life. My wife Martha was cleaning up the backyard when she found something strange buried near the old peach tree. It was a raggedy cloth doll, half rotted and covered in dirt. The fabric had faded to an ugly gray-brown, but you could still see the bright red thread in the seams, real eye-catching stuff. The strangest thing about this doll, though, was that it had no mouth. It had eyes made from black buttons, a nose drawn on with thread, but where the mouth should have been was just smooth fabric, like whoever made it had forgotten to embroider one or left it that way on purpose. Martha, she got real queasy looking at that thing. Said a doll buried in the yard wasn't normal, that it had to be some kind of hoodoo work, you know, the kind of stuff people do when they want to hurt others. She tossed it straight in the trash and didn't want to hear where it came from. Told me she was gonna ask Father Rodriguez to bless the yard, because it wasn't right having things buried like that. And she had this bad feeling about the whole situation. But that very same night, something horrible happened. Our house filled up with black ants, ants coming out of everywhere. From the walls, from the pillows, from the kitchen drain, even from inside the closets. These were small fire ants, the kind that bite and burn like hell. Martha woke up with ants crawling up her legs. She turned on the light and saw the bed was black with them. I woke up too, covered in bites, and man, there were so many ants it looked like they'd all come out of some giant anthill at once. We ran out of the house because there was no way to stay inside. The ants were everywhere, climbing the walls, covering the floor. The weird part was they were only inside the house. Outside, there wasn't a single one. We spent the whole night waiting for them to leave. In the morning when we came back to check, they were all gone. Not one ant left inside the house, but they'd left this sour smell in the air like dead ants. And there, sitting on top of the stove, was the doll. The same exact doll Martha had thrown in the trash. It was sitting there like someone had placed it there on purpose, and it reeked of kerosene. I went to check the trash, and the doll wasn't there anymore, just a torn garbage bag like someone had pulled it out. But who would want a dirty doll like that, and how did it end up on our stove? Martha was terrified. She said she wasn't going to touch the doll again, that it was better to leave it where it was, that whoever put it there must have had a reason, and it was dangerous to go against that kind of thing. But me, I don't believe much in that stuff, so I decided to throw the doll away again. This time I took it far away, tossed it in a hole in the woods. Told Martha that was the end of it, that the ant thing was just coincidence. But the next day, the doll was back in the same place on top of the stove, smelling like kerosene again, and nobody had lit the stove that day. Martha hadn't even cooked because she was afraid to use it. Then it became routine. Every Friday morning, the doll would appear in the same spot, always smelling like kerosene, always in the same position. And whenever it appeared, you'd get this bad feeling in the house, like someone was watching you. I tried several times to get rid of it, burned it, threw it in the river, buried it somewhere else. But every Friday it came back, always intact, always in the same place. It was like it had chosen our house to stay in. Martha stopped trying to remove the doll. She said it was better to live with it than keep fighting, because every time we tried to get rid of it, something bad would happen. Ants, cockroaches, even a scorpion showed up in the house after we messed with it. Now we just avoid the kitchen on Friday mornings. We wait for the doll to appear, leave it there all day, and only on Saturday do we go back to using the stove normally. It's like we made a deal with the thing. The strange part is the doll never moves. It always stays in the same position, always looking in the same direction. But sometimes when you walk past the kitchen, you get the feeling its eyes follow your movement, and the kerosene smell never completely goes away. Even when the doll isn't there, there's still a hint of that smell in the air, like it's marking its territory so everyone knows that's its place. Nobody knows who buried the doll in our yard or why. Could have been the previous owners, could have been some kind of curse work against me, who knows. What matters is that now it's part of our house routine. And you know what? After we accepted its presence, things got calmer. No more bugs in the house. Nothing strange happens. It's like the doll just wanted to be respected, to have its little corner acknowledged. My mother was always deeply religious, one of those people who lights candles every Sunday and says the rosary every night. She always told me something that stuck in my head. If you promise candles for someone's soul, you have to keep that promise, because souls never forget unchosen commitments. There was this guy here who did fence work, Johnny Martinez. Hardworking man, did quality work, but he was kind of forgetful about religious things, you know. Wasn't much for going to church, wasn't really connected to spiritual matters. Then this tragedy happened on the property. An old cowboy that everyone knew had a terrible accident. He was hammering some fence posts when the nail bent and flew off, hitting him right in the eye. It was quick. The man died instantly. Everyone was shaken up because he was a beloved guy, had worked here for many years. At the wake, people were talking about how unfair his death was. A stupid accident that could have been prevented. Johnny was getting emotional at the funeral, had a few drinks too many, and started saying he was gonna light candles for the cowboy, that he'd take 3 candles to the church and ask for his soul to rest in peace. Everyone heard him make this promise. But after the burial, Johnny completely forgot what he'd said. He went back to his routine, kept building fences, and never mentioned the candles again. When someone reminded him, he'd make some excuse. A week passed, then 2 weeks, and Johnny still hadn't kept his promise. Then strange things started happening to him. First, it was a severe headache that wouldn't go away with any medicine. Then his vision started getting blurry. He went to the doctor in town, got tested, but nothing showed up. The doctor said everything was normal, that it could be stress or fatigue. But his vision kept getting worse, especially in his right eye, the same side where the nail had hit the cowboy. Then one morning, he woke up seeing nothing out of his right eye, completely blind on that side. He rushed to the doctor again, but the doctor couldn't explain what had happened. Said the eye was healthy, but had lost vision overnight. My mother, who knew about the promise he'd made, told him to go get those candles, that this wasn't coincidence. It was the cowboy collecting what had been promised. But Johnny stubbornly insisted it had nothing to do with that. Then I remembered the place where the cowboy had died. It had been a while since anyone passed by there because it gave you a bad feeling. I decided to go take a look to see if there was anything different. When I got there, I saw something that gave me chills. On the ground, right where the cowboy had fallen, there was a mark that looked like fresh blood, but dried for a long time. Like the blood had stuck to the earth and never left. The mark was round, about the size of a person's head, and in the middle was a smaller, darker spot, like it was the exact place where the nail had hit. It was too clear, too specific to be coincidence. I showed my mother, and she confirmed what I was thinking. She said it was definitely a sign that the cowboy was marking the place where he died, and that as long as Johnny didn't keep his promise, the mark would stay there. We went to find Johnny and told him what we'd seen. He was getting desperate because he couldn't work properly with just one eye. You need good vision to build fences, to measure right, to hit the nail in the right spot. Finally, he decided to go get the candles. We all went together to the church in town. He bought 3 large, beautiful candles and lit them one by one, said a prayer for each candle, asking forgiveness from the cowboy. That same day when we returned, the mark on the ground had completely disappeared. The earth was normal, like nothing had ever happened there. And Johnny, the next day he woke up seeing again, not completely like before, but he could see. He could tell light from dark, could make out shapes enough to get back to work. But there was one problem: he could only see during the day. When it got dark, the eye stopped working again. It was like the vision was borrowed, only worked while there was sunlight. My mother explained that's how it is when you take too long to keep a promise. The soul gets a bit resentful. It had given his sight back, but not completely. It was like a reminder for him to never again forget to keep what he promises. Since then, Johnny became a different man. Whenever someone died, he was the first to light candles. Whenever he made a promise, he kept it right away. And he never complained about only seeing during the day, because he knew it could have been worse. He could have been blind in both eyes, or the same thing that happened to the cowboy could have happened to him. Even today, when he passes by the place where the cowboy died, he makes the sign of the cross and says a prayer, because he knows there are souls that don't forget, and that promises are serious business, not something to mess around with. Nelson was a good guy, had been working here for about 5 years. Kind of quiet but hardworking, never gave anyone trouble. Then that summer, he decided to cool off in the pond after lunch. It was damn hot. Everyone was sweating buckets, so it was normal for folks to go take a dip there. But Nelson couldn't swim very well. We didn't know that, or we would have warned him to be careful. The pond looks shallow, but it's got some deep holes, especially where the water hits the rocks. He must have stepped wrong and went under. When we noticed he hadn't come back from lunch, we went looking for him. Found him floating at the bottom of the pond, already gone. It was sad, man. A young guy full of plans died just like that over something stupid. We called the police. They did what they had to do, released the body to his family. The funeral was in a neighboring town where his mother lived. Everyone here was shaken up because he was a work buddy. We lived with him every day. Then about 2 weeks later, strange things started happening. In the morning when we'd get to the bunkhouse, there'd be wet boot prints on the porch boards. Perfect prints, like someone had walked there with soaked feet. At first, we thought it was one of us who'd stepped in water and forgotten, or that it had rained during the night and only wetted that one spot. But it hadn't rained, and the prints were 2 specific size of a man's foot, with the sole pattern clearly marked. Always in the same place, always going in the same direction, like someone was coming out of the pond and walking to the porch and disappearing. The prints went from the direction of the water right to the door of the bunkhouse, where Nelson used to sleep. Then the spur noise started. Anyone who works with cattle knows that sound, the jingle when metal hits metal. And it was always at 3 in the morning, right on time like an alarm clock. The sound came from the porch, always in the same place where the wet prints appeared. It was like someone was walking slowly with spurred boots, making that dry sound on the wood. But when we'd go out to check, there was nobody there. This went on for a week. Everyone was getting nervous because it was disturbing to wake up every day at the same time with that noise, and the wet prints kept appearing, always fresh like they'd just been made. The foreman was getting irritated with the situation. Said it was nonsense, that someone was doing this to scare people. Then he remembered that Nelson's boots were still stored in the bunkhouse, in his locker. He thought maybe someone was using the boots to make the prints, so he grabbed them and threw them way out in the brush. Said that was the end of the joke, that whoever wanted to play pranks would have to find other boots. But the next day, the boots were on top of the foreman's room roof, right up there in the middle, like someone had placed them there on purpose. There was no ladder that reached up there, no tree nearby, no way for someone to climb up. The foreman went white when he saw it, because he himself had thrown the boots in the brush, had seen them fall far away, and now they were on his bedroom roof like it was a message directed at him. That night the spur noise was different. Instead of coming from the porch, it came from above the foreman's room, like someone was walking on the roof right over his bed. The foreman couldn't sleep, spent the whole night listening to that jingling above his head. The next day he said he was going to sleep in town, that he didn't want to stay in the bunkhouse anymore. And since then, nobody wanted to sleep in that room, because the noise continued every night, always at 3 o'clock. We moved the foreman's room to another place, but the noise kept coming from the empty room, and the wet boot prints kept appearing on the porch, always in the same place, always going in the same direction. There was one night I had insomnia and decided to stay on the porch to see if I could see anything. I sat there smoking, waiting for 3 o'clock. When the time came, I heard the spur noise coming in my direction. I could see the porch boards sinking like someone was stepping on them, but there was nobody there, just the sound of spurs and the wood creaking under the weight. It was like an invisible person was walking right in front of me. The noise stopped right next to me. I sat there without moving, feeling like someone was looking at me. There was a smell of stagnant water in the air, like pond water, and I felt this chill like someone soaked had passed near me. After that, I never stayed alone on the porch at night again. The crew kind of got used to the noise. Everyone knew that at 3 o'clock there'd be the spur jingling, so we just turn over and try to ignore it. But Nelson's room, nobody ever used it again. It became like a storage room, place to keep old tools, because even after all this time, there are still strange noises in there. And sometimes when you pass by the window, you can see shadows moving inside the empty room. My father worked with cattle his whole life, so I grew up watching him handle cows in all kinds of situations, difficult births, sickness, injuries, things that happen. But what happened with that cow I'll never forget, and I was just a kid back then. It was a cow that had just given birth to a beautiful heifer we called Star. She was one of the best in the herd, always healthy, never gave us trouble. The birth was normal, the calf was born fine, everything was right. But the next day she started making a strange noise. At first we thought it was pain. Sometimes after giving birth they get a bit sore, it's normal. But this wasn't a cow's bellow. It was crying, like a person crying with sobs and everything. You know, like when someone's really sad and makes that choking sound. My dad got worried and called the vet to take a look at her. The man examined everything, said she was in good health, no inflammation, nothing that explained that crying. But she kept making that strange sound. Then we noticed something weird. She only cried when she looked at the old fence at the back of the pasture. It was an old fence, kind of falling down, that nobody used anymore. When she looked other ways, she was normal. but when she turned her head toward there, she'd start that heartbreaking crying. We thought it was strange. What connection could a cow have with an old fence? I thought maybe there was some animal there that was scaring her or some bad smell. But when we went to check, there was nothing different. But then the strangest part started. At night when we'd pass near the fence, you could see a child sitting there. A small child, naked, with long hair covering its face, swinging its legs like it was playing. The first time I saw it, I thought it was someone's kid who'd gotten lost. I ran to tell my dad so he could go get the child. But when we came back with a flashlight, there was nobody there, just the empty old fence. Then this became routine. Every night the child would appear sitting on the fence, always in the same position, and the cow kept crying when she looked over there. It was like she could see the child too, and it made her sad. My dad got intrigued by this. He asked the neighbors if they knew any child who used to play around there, but nobody knew anything. And the property was kind of isolated. There weren't any houses nearby that could have a child. One night I decided to get closer to the fence to see better. I went slowly, trying not to make noise. The child was there, swinging its legs like always, but when I got closer, I saw there was something wrong. It didn't make any sound when it moved, not even when it swung its legs on the fence wood. And its hair was always in the same place covering its face, even when there was wind. It was like the hair was stuck there. I stood there watching, trying to understand. Then the child stopped swinging its legs and turned its head in my direction. But I couldn't see its face because of the hair. I just felt it was looking at me through the hair. Then it got up slowly and started walking along the fence, always with its back to me. It walked kind of crooked, like it was hurt, and it didn't make any sound of feet hitting the wood. It was like it was very light, or like it wasn't really touching the fence. I got scared and ran back. I told my dad what I'd seen, but he said it could have been my imagination, that at night you see things that don't exist. But I knew it wasn't imagination. The next day we went to check on the cow, and she was dead. It was the strangest thing I ever saw. She had strangled herself with her own neck skin. Like the skin had stretched and turned into a noose around her neck. My dad said he'd never seen anything like it, because cows don't kill themselves. There's no way a cow decides to hang itself, and skin doesn't stretch by itself like that. There had to be some force pulling down to do that. We cut the skin to free her, but it was too late. And when we released the skin, it went back to normal size. It was like it had been stretched by something very strong and then relaxed. After that, we never saw the child on the fence again, and that part of the pasture became kind of cursed. No animal liked to graze near there. They always avoided that fence like they sensed something bad in the air. Years later, my dad found out that before we lived there, a tragedy had happened. A small child had drowned in the pond that was near the fence, and the parents had been so devastated that they sold the property and left. Then everything made sense, the child on the fence, the cow crying. It was all like the child's soul had gotten trapped in that place, trying to get attention somehow, and the cow, being a sensitive animal, could see and feel its sadness. Even today when I pass by that fence, even though it's older and more broken now, I still get chills because I know there was a tragedy there, and that these things don't just disappear easily. They stay stuck to the place where they happened. The boss was one of those guys who doesn't believe in anything, you know. always said folklore was stuff for ignorant people and that we had to use reason for everything. So when whirlwinds started appearing on the property, he got irritated with the stories people told. Everyone said it was a dust devil spirit because it always appeared in the same place near the reservoir, always in the afternoon. And it was a real whirlwind, one of those that lifts leaves and dirt and spins in the same spot. But there was no wind, you understand. The rest of the place was calm. Only that one spot had the whirlwind. The boss said it was just natural phenomenon, air temperature differences, scientific stuff like that. But the older folks didn't agree. They said it was a spirit, that we shouldn't mess with it because it could cause problems. So the boss decided to prove there was nothing special about it. He called Jake, who's kind of adventurous, and told him to try to catch the whirlwind in a bottle. Said if he could do it, he'd get extra money that month. Jake accepted. He always needed cash and wasn't too scared of these things. He took a green bottle, one of those old whiskey bottles, and went over by the reservoir to wait for the whirlwind to appear. Didn't take long, around 4 in the afternoon, the whirlwind started forming, just like always. Jake got close slowly with the bottle in his hand. The whirlwind was still small, about the size of a child. Then Jake did something that still gives me chills to remember. He stuck the bottle's mouth inside the whirlwind and capped it quickly. The whirlwind disappeared instantly, like it had been sucked into the bottle. And the bottle became heavy, really heavy, like it was full of something dense. Jake sealed the bottle with beeswax real tight. You could feel there was something moving in there. The bottle would shake by itself, like someone was trying to get out, and it made a low noise, like moaning or whimpering. The boss was all satisfied, thinking he'd proved his point. He told Jake to store the bottle in the office as a trophy. Said he was gonna show his city friends that he'd captured a dust devil, making fun of the whole thing. But that very same night, things started going wrong. First, it was the tractor that caught fire by itself. It was just sitting there in the barn, wasn't even running, and suddenly smoke started coming out of the engine. When we got there to see, it was really on fire. We managed to put it out, but the tractor was all burned up inside. The strange thing was the fire didn't spread to anything around it. Only the tractor burned, like the fire had chosen just it to attack. Then the cows started getting agitated. All of them at once. They ran out of the pasture like something was scaring them. And there was nothing, no dogs, nothing that could spook the cattle like that. The cows ran and ended up knocking down the fence, all escaped to the woods. We had to spend the whole night looking for them with flashlights. We found some, but others only showed up days later, thin and scared. And the well went bad overnight. In the morning, the water was normal. By afternoon, it tasted bad and smelled like rotten eggs. We had to call a technician to see what happened, but he couldn't explain it. The boss was getting nervous 3 problems in one night, right after trapping the whirlwind. But he stubbornly said it was coincidence, that one thing had nothing to do with the other. Then in the morning we went to check the bottle, and the wax was all cracked inside. Like someone had scratched it trying to get out. There were small claw or nail marks scoring the wax. And the bottle wasn't shaking anymore. It was quiet and light. We opened it to see, and there was nothing inside. Just a strong smell of wet grass and earth, like whatever was trapped had managed to get out during the night. And Jake, we found him in the reservoir. He was floating face up with a round hole in the middle of his chest, but there wasn't any blood. Not a single drop of blood. It was like someone had taken something out from inside him and then sealed the hole. The doctor who came to examine him said he'd never seen anything like it. Jake's heart had disappeared, but there was no cut mark, nothing that explained how it happened. It was like the heart had simply vanished. After that, the boss never talked about capturing whirlwinds again. And every time one appears around here, we leave it alone, because there are things that are better left alone. Jake paid the price for messing with what he shouldn't have, and it was too high a price. I've been raising chickens since I was little, learned from my dad and grandpa. So I know when there's trouble with the birds, when it's disease, when it's animals attacking, those kinds of things. But what happened that month was different from anything I'd ever seen. It started on a Monday. I went to the coop in the morning, and one of the fattest hens had disappeared. No feathers, no blood, nothing, just the perch knocked over and a strong tobacco smoke smell in the air. I thought it could be a fox or wild dog, but it was strange not to have any trace of a fight. Then on Tuesday it happened again. Another hen disappeared exactly the same way, perch knocked over, tobacco smoke smell, and nothing else. I started getting worried because chickens are my livelihood here. If they keep disappearing like this, I'll be broke. I decided to sleep near the coop to see if I could catch whatever it was in the act. I set up a hammock nearby and kept watch during the night. It was a new moon, so it was really dark, just the sound of chickens moving on their perches and crickets singing. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a different noise coming from inside the coop. It wasn't chickens moving. It was like someone was dragging something on the ground, a scratching sound, scraping in the dirt. I grabbed the flashlight and went to see what it was. When I got to the coop door, I smelled that strong tobacco smoke again. But it wasn't regular cigarette smoke. It was pipe tobacco, the kind old folks used to smoke. Really strong stuff that sticks in your throat. I turned on the flashlight and went in slowly. The chickens were agitated, flapping wings and making noise. And right in the middle of the coop, there was a whirlwind. But it wasn't a normal wind whirlwind. It was a still whirlwind, spinning in the same place in total silence. I stood there staring at that thing, not believing what I was seeing. The whirlwind was small, about the size of a person, and inside it you could see a shadow moving. It was like a dark silhouette spinning along with the dirt and leaves. Then the shadow inside the whirlwind became clearer. It was a kid, but a strange kid. It only had one leg, and where the other leg should be, there was nothing. And the kid was laughing, a low laugh, but you could hear it clearly. It looked at me and kept laughing. It was a mean laugh, like it knew something I didn't know. And its eyes glowed in the dark, like animal eyes at night when they catch the light. The kid stretched its hand toward one of the chickens. The chicken tried to fly, but couldn't leave its spot. It was like it was stuck in the air. Then the whirlwind moved toward the chicken, and it simply disappeared inside it. No scream, no noise, nothing. The chicken just vanished, and the kid kept laughing, looking at me like it was the most normal thing in the world. Then the whirlwind started moving toward the coop door. I ran out of there. I'd never run so fast in my life. I went straight home and locked everything, spent the rest of the night awake listening to noises outside. It sounded like someone walking around the house, dragging something. The next day I went back to the coop. Everything was normal except another chicken was missing, and there was a round mark on the ground like someone had drawn a circle in the dirt. Inside the circle was ash, tobacco ash. Then I remembered the stories my grandpa used to tell about trickster spirits. He always said they like to play pranks, but can also be dangerous when someone messes with them, and that they smoke pipe tobacco and travel in whirlwinds. After that night, I never threw pipe tobacco away carelessly again. My grandpa always said loose tobacco attracts spirits. Now, I always put it in the prayer altar, along with other offerings to show respect. And after I started doing that, chickens never disappeared again. The coop became peaceful again. But sometimes, especially when it's windy, I hear that low laugh coming from the woods. And whenever I hear it, I go to the altar and leave a little more tobacco, because I figure it's better to keep things peaceful. Chickens are my livelihood, and if the spirit wants pipe tobacco, then pipe tobacco is what it'll get, as long as it leaves my chickens alone. I was a caretaker at an old property, one of those big houses with wooden porches and old windows that creak. The lady only showed up once in a while, so most of the time I was alone taking care of everything. It was peaceful. I liked the quiet that was there. Then every late afternoon after the lady left, I'd see a woman sitting on the porch, always dressed in white, hands in her lap, looking out at the woods. She'd sit there real quiet without moving much. At first I thought she was a visitor who'd stayed behind, because sometimes that happens, people get talking and such. But then I noticed she always sat in the same place. There was an old wooden bench there on the porch, and she always chose that bench. She'd stay there for hours. I'd see her when I was doing my chores, always in the same position, always in white. One day I decided to ask the lady who that woman was who stayed on the porch. I thought it could be a relative or some friend who liked to come there to rest. Then the lady looked at me kind of strange and asked, "What woman?" I explained, told her about the woman in white who always sat on the bench. Then she went kind of pale and told me something that gave me chills all over. She said nobody had sat on that bench since her mother died, and that her mother always liked to sit there in the late afternoon in a white dress, looking out at the woods. I felt cold in my stomach when she said that. I thought it was coincidence that maybe another person had the same habit. But then the next day, I paid more attention. The woman was there again at the same time, same position. But this time I noticed she didn't make noise when she sat. The bench didn't creak or anything. And there's another thing, when I looked directly at her, she seemed to get kind of transparent. Like I could see the woods behind her through the white dress. I thought it was a problem with my eyes, but it wasn't. It was like she wasn't completely solid. Then I started getting nervous, because if it was the lady's mother who died, what was she doing there? And why could only I see her? Because the lady never mentioned seeing anyone on the porch. One afternoon, I decided to get closer. I was scared, but curiosity won out. I walked slowly toward the porch, trying not to make noise. The woman kept sitting there quietly, looking at the woods. When I got closer, I saw she had a really old face with grayish hair pulled back in a bun. But the strange thing was she didn't look at me. It was like I didn't exist there. I stood there waiting for some reaction, but nothing. She just kept looking at the woods with her hands in her lap, breathing slowly. Or at least it seemed like she was breathing, because I could see the dress rising and falling slightly. Then Then I thought about saying something like greeting her or asking if she was okay. But right when I was about to open my mouth, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes were different. They weren't living person's eyes. They were kind of cloudy, like doll eyes. She looked at me for a second and then went back to looking at the woods. Didn't say anything, didn't make gestures, nothing. Just looked at me and turned her head back. I stood there not knowing what to do until I decided to slip away quietly. The next day when I woke up, I went to check the porch and the bench was wet. Really wet, like someone had spilled water there. But it hadn't rained during the night and the rest of the porch was dry. Only the bench was soaked. Then I started noticing this happened always. Every morning the bench would be wet, even without rain. It was like someone had cried there during the night, or like humidity accumulated only in that place. The woman kept appearing every late afternoon, always at the same time, always in the same position. Sometimes I'd watch from far away, trying to understand what she was looking at out in the woods. But it was just woods, nothing special. Once I asked the lady how her mother had died. She told me it was from sadness after her husband died. Said her mother would spend hours sitting on that bench waiting for him to come back, and that she died there one afternoon, looking out at the woods. After I learned that, I kind of got used to her presence. It was strange, but it didn't seem like evil. It was like she just wanted to stay there in the place she loved, and I respected that. When I saw her on the porch, I'd do my chores in another part, left her in peace. But even today, when I pass by there in the morning and see the wet bench, it gives me chills because I know she spent the night there waiting for something that's never going to come. I work with cattle, and I always whistle to call the bulls. It's normal. Everyone who works with this stuff does it. So that day, I was there at the corral, kind of bored, and I whistled for no reason, just because. Then I heard the same whistle coming back, exactly the same but more high-pitched. It was coming from up on the fence post. I thought it was the guys messing with me, because sometimes we do that, but when I looked there was nobody there. But I swear I saw a red cap disappearing behind the corral. It was real quick, but I saw it like someone had hidden behind their running. I went to check, and there was nothing, no footprints, nothing. The ground was normal, but the feeling was strange, like someone had really been there. And you know, since that day, I never whistled at night again. It leaves a bad feeling. Then the strangest part started. The next day I went to get my hoe, and it wasn't where I'd left it. It was on the other side of the corral, leaning against a tree. I thought someone had moved it, but when I asked the crew, nobody knew anything. And we always take care of our tools here, because if you lose one, you have to replace it out of your own pocket. Then it became routine. I'd leave the hammer on the workbench, and the next day it would be hanging on the fence. I'd put the shovel in one corner, and it would appear in another, always like someone had taken it to use, and then put it in a different place, but never in the right place. At first I thought it was the others messing with me, but then I started noticing this happened even when I was alone. Like Friday, I'd leave everything organized, and Monday, when I came back, things were moved. And this place is kind of isolated. There's no way for someone to get in easily. There's fence, there's dogs, there's everything. One day I decided to test it. I left a specific screwdriver in one place and marked with a scratch on the wood where it was. The next day the screwdriver was about 10 feet away on top of a barrel. And it hadn't rained. There was no wind, nothing that explained it. And you know what makes me most nervous? When these things happen, I feel like someone's watching me. It's a feeling in your back, like when you sense people looking, but when you turn around there's nobody. But here it's constant, especially when I find the tools out of place. There was one time I was fixing a fence and needed the pliers. I was sure I'd left them in the toolbox, but when I went to get them, they weren't there. I looked everywhere and nothing. Then I heard a little noise, like metal hitting, coming from behind the barn. I went to see, and the pliers were there, swinging on a rope. I don't even know where it came from. Like someone had tied it and left it swinging on purpose. And there's more. Sometimes I hear footsteps on the barn roof, especially in the afternoon. Like someone walking slowly up there. But when I look, there's nobody. And that roof is high. There's no way to get up there without a ladder. I thought it could be cats or possums, but the noise is different. It's real footsteps, steady like it's people. One time I was putting things away at the end of the day, and I heard that whistle again. The same one I'd made that first day. But now it was coming from inside the barn. I stood there not knowing what to do. The whistle stopped and then came again. But from the other side, like whoever was whistling had moved real quick. Then I thought maybe I should answer, like see what happens. But right when I was about to whistle back, I got this chill in my stomach. Something told me not to do it, so I just grabbed my things and left. After that, the tools kept appearing out of place, always like someone was playing with me. And I've always been careful with these things, always put everything away right. But now, it's like it became a game for someone. The strange thing is nothing ever disappears. The tools always show up, just in the wrong place. It's like whoever does this doesn't want to steal, just wants to mess around or get attention. And always when I find things out of place, I get that feeling that someone's nearby watching me. Even today, I don't know what happened that day with the whistle, and these things with the tools continue. I've tried hiding some to see if it stops, but it doesn't help. There's always some that appear in the wrong place. It's like whoever does this knows exactly where I put everything. I always took that road on my motorcycle. It was my daily route back from work. It's a kind of isolated road that runs right alongside the big sugarcane field there. Nothing had ever happened. It was always peaceful. Then that day I was coming back later than usual. I'd stayed late at work, so when I left it was already getting dark. I wasn't worried because I knew the route with my eyes closed, had taken it hundreds of times. I was riding along fine, thinking about life, when I heard a little laugh coming from the middle of the cane field. It was a child's laugh, one of those real high-pitched ones. At first I thought it was some kid playing around there, because sometimes that happens. Children like to play in the middle of plantations. But then I noticed the laugh was kind of strange. It was too dry and kind of off-key, like the child had a throat problem or was forcing the voice. It wasn't natural laughter. It was like when someone forces a fake laugh. I slowed down the motorcycle to listen better. The laugh kept coming from inside the cane field, always from the same place. But it was strange because the cane field there is real thick and tall. There's no way for a child to walk in the middle of that easily, because the cane grows real close together. I stopped the bike and turned off the engine to try to locate where the sound was coming from. The laugh stopped the instant I turned off the motorcycle. There was total silence. Not even crickets were singing. It was like the whole world had stopped to listen. I stayed there for a few minutes waiting to hear it again. Then the laugh came back, but louder now. And it was like it had gotten closer to the road, moving through the cane field in my direction. Then I looked toward where the sound was coming from and saw something that left me frozen. There was a hat spinning in the air by itself. It was a straw hat, one of those country folks wear, but it was spinning in the air about 6 feet high with nothing holding it. The hat spun slowly like a Ferris wheel, and the laugh was coming from underneath it, like the child was under the hat, but you couldn't see anyone, just the hat spinning by itself in midair. I started getting nervous because that wasn't normal. Hats don't spin by themselves in the air, especially without wind. And the laugh kept going, always coming from under that strange hat. I decided to start the bike and get out of there. I didn't want to know what that was anymore. Right when I started the engine, the laugh got even louder, like whoever was laughing had gotten mad at me for trying to leave. I gunned the motorcycle and got out of there fast. But when I was picking up speed, I felt something pull my shirt hard. It was a sharp jerk, real strong, like someone had grabbed the fabric and yanked it backward. The pull was so strong it almost knocked me off the bike. I managed to keep my balance, but heard the sound of the shirt tearing. It was a new shirt made of tough fabric, but it ripped like it was paper. I looked back real quick and saw the hat was still there spinning in the air, but now it was higher, like it had risen up. And the laugh had turned into a deeper sound, like an adult's cackle. I didn't stop anymore until I got home. I gunned it as fast as the bike could handle, scared of feeling another pull. And during the whole ride, I felt like someone was following me, even though I couldn't see anything in the rearview mirror. When I got home, I went to check the damage to the shirt. It had torn right at the neck, a long rip that went almost to the belly. The strange thing was the tear was too straight, like it had been cut with a knife. But what caught my attention most was the smell. I was reeking of tobacco, rolled tobacco, real strong, stuck to my clothes and hair. It was like I'd spent hours inside a bar full of smokers. I took a shower, but the smell wouldn't come out. I washed my hair 3 times and nothing. The tobacco smell was still stuck to me, especially around my neck where the shirt had torn. It was a nauseating smell that made me queasy. My wife was surprised when I got home, asked if I'd stopped at some bar because I was reeking of cigarettes. I explained what had happened, but she thought I was making up an excuse to explain the smell. The next day I told the story to my coworkers. Some laughed, thought I was exaggerating. But there was an older guy who took me seriously. He said he'd heard similar stories about that road. Said years ago, a child had died in that cane field, a boy who got lost from his family and ended up getting hurt in the middle of the plantation. And his father was a smoker, always had a cigarette in his mouth when he went out looking for his son. He also said some people had already reported strange things on that road, child's laughter, shadows in the middle of the cane, tobacco smell out of nowhere. Said it was better for me to find another route back from work. Even today, I avoid taking that road, especially when it's getting dark. I found another route that's longer but safer, because who knows what else might happen if I run into that spinning hat again. The tobacco smell took almost a week to come out completely. Even after several showers, there was still a little bit stuck to me. It was like that encounter had marked my body somehow. Sometimes when I pass near cane fields in other places, I get a strange feeling, like I'm going to hear that laugh again. I always keep an eye on the sky, looking for hats spinning by themselves. The old caretaker of the property was a very religious man, Mr. Thompson. Dedicated guy, had worked there for more than 20 years, and there was one thing he took very seriously: taking care of the chapel on the ranch. It was a small old chapel, but well maintained. Every Saturday, Mr. Thompson would clean the chapel, change the flowers, light candles for Our Lady. He said he'd made a promise when he started working there that he'd take care of that sacred place until the day he died. And he kept it religiously, never missed a single Saturday. The chapel was beautiful, had a wooden altar, some old but sturdy pews, and a small bell that Mr. Thompson would ring every Sunday morning. People in the area even knew the sound of that bell, knew it was time for prayer. Then Mr. Thompson got sick and couldn't work anymore. It was diabetes, serious stuff that got complicated with age. The boss let him stay in the house anyway because he had affection for the old man, and his son Adam took over his father's place. Adam was different from his father. He didn't have all that religiousness. He was more focused on modern things. Didn't see any problem abandoning the chapel. Said it was a waste of time to keep cleaning a place hardly anyone used. When Mr. Thompson died, Adam simply stopped taking care of the chapel. He locked the doors and never went in there anymore. Told the boss he was going to concentrate on the ranch work, that the chapel wasn't his responsibility. The chapel started getting abandoned. Dust accumulated, spider webs, dried leaves that came in through the windows. The bell went silent, the candles ran out, even the flowers withered on the altar. It was sad to see because it had been such a well-cared-for place. Then strange things started happening. First, it was the chickens that started disappearing. Adam had a small coop near his house for his own consumption, and the chickens started vanishing, always at night. At first he thought it was wild animals, possums, foxes, things that attacked chicken coops. But there were no feathers, no blood, no signs of struggle. The chickens simply disappeared like they'd flown away. After a week of losing chickens every day, Adam decided to keep watch. He stayed awake in the early morning hours, keeping an eye on the coop. But even with him watching, the chickens kept disappearing. It was like they vanished right in front of him. Then the bell business started. On Monday night around 11 o'clock, the chapel bell started ringing by itself. It wasn't wind because there was no wind, and it wasn't swaying because the bell rang properly, like when someone pulls the rope. Adam went to the chapel to see what was happening. The door was locked just like he'd left it, but the bell kept ringing inside, always in the same rhythm, 3 chimes, stop, 3 chimes again. Tuesday the same thing, 11 at night, the bell started ringing by itself. And Wednesday too, always the same time, always 3 chimes at a time. Adam was starting to get nervous about it. Thursday he decided to go into the chapel to see if someone was messing with the bell. He got the key and opened the door right when the bell started ringing. But when he went in, the bell stopped immediately and there was nobody inside. But the chapel was different. There were 3 candles lit on the altar, burning steady, big new candles, the kind that last a long time. And Adam knew there were no candles in the chapel. He himself had removed everything when he locked the place up. He blew out the candles and ran out of there, locked the door and went home, thinking maybe someone was playing a prank on him. But who would have access to the chapel? Only he had the key. Friday, the bell didn't ring. Adam even thought it was strange because it had become routine. But Saturday, which was the day his father always cleaned the chapel, the bell rang all night long. It never stopped, always those 3 chimes. Sunday morning, Adam woke up and the bell had stopped. He thought it was finally over, that disturbance. But when he went to check the chickens, there weren't any left. The coop was empty, just with the door open. Then he decided to go to the chapel to see if everything was normal. When he got there, the door was open, wide open, like someone had gone in during the night. And when he looked inside, he saw Adam was dead. He was kneeling in front of the altar with a lit candle in each hand. The candles were new, big, beautiful ones, burning steady like they'd just been lit. His body was in prayer position, knees on the ground, head down, hands raised, holding the candles. It was like he'd died praying, asking forgiveness for something. They called the police, did the investigation. The doctor said it was cardiac arrest, could have been shock or strong emotion. But nobody could explain the candles. They were expensive, good quality candles, and nobody on the ranch had bought them. And there was another strange thing. The candles had burned all night, but still had wax to burn for many more hours. It was like they'd been made to last exactly until someone found the body. After Adam's burial, the boss hired another caretaker. And the first thing the new caretaker did was clean the chapel and go back to taking care of it properly. He said sacred places can't be left abandoned, that it causes problems. Since then, nothing strange has ever happened again. The bell only rings when someone pulls it. The chickens stay put. The chapel is always clean and organized. It's like Mr. Thompson's spirit was satisfied with the new arrangement. But everyone who knows the story is wary of messing with the chapel, because they saw what happened to whoever didn't respect the promise that was made. And promises to saints are serious business, not something to mess around with. I've been driving these highways for over 20 years now, hauling loads from coast to coast across America. In all that time, I've learned one thing. If you don't respect the road, it'll swallow you whole. I've seen good truckers break down because they didn't know when to stop. Young drivers wrapping themselves around curves because they trusted their brakes too much. And even some fools who thought they could outsmart their dispatcher and ended up disappearing into the void. I'm not one of those guys. Never been one to take stupid risks, never trusted GPS completely, and above all, never picked up hitchhikers. My name's Joe Tobacco, yeah, that's what they call me on the CB, but that's not important right now. What matters is that I had a route to complete. This particular load was cut timber, picked up from a logging operation in Kalispell, Montana. Destination: a lumber yard in Billings. Long haul, but straightforward, at least on paper. Anyone who runs Interstate 90 knows that stretch is full of long straights and cheap truck stops. So I had my plan. Leave in the late afternoon, drive through the night, then catch some sleep at a reliable stop. The pickup went smooth. Got the rig loaded at the company yard, checked the trailer, everything was secure. Timber stacked neat and tight, tarps properly tied down, nothing loose. The smell of fresh sawdust was still strong, which gave me some relief. I've hauled worse loads before, like that fish shipment that left my truck stinking for days if something went wrong. Before hitting the road, I checked my paperwork and documents on the dashboard. CB radio was working, cell phone charged, got my thermos full of black coffee just the way I like it, and a container of gas station sandwiches next to me. Everything ready. Left the yard at 5 in the evening, sun still high in the Montana sky. First part of the trip was smooth sailing, just like I expected. The truck glided on fresh asphalt, and the highway was empty except for a few four-wheelers here and there. Anyone who drives long distances knows that when the road's like this, it's almost an invitation to let your mind wander. Problem is, when you're driving alone, your head doesn't take long to start keeping itself company. That's why I fired up the CB and called out to any fellow drivers on the frequency. Any brothers out there listening? Silence. I switched channels and tried again. Any drivers on I-90? Nothing. Strange, there's always someone listening, even if it's just to shoot the breeze. But whatever. The sky was starting to darken, and I knew in a few hours I'd find other drivers at the truck stops along the highway. Important thing was to keep moving, and that's exactly what I did. That night, I didn't know yet that this silence on the radio would be the least of my problems. Night fell fast. Interstate 90 is a road of extremes. During the day, the sun beats down hard and the landscape is always the same. Wheat fields, cattle ranches, and the occasional forgotten town in the middle of nowhere. But when night comes, everything changes. The darkness swallows the highway, and suddenly there's nothing but headlights cutting through the black and the rumble of the engine breaking the silence. I was about 4 hours into the drive when I passed through Livingston. Made a quick stop at a truck stop I knew, just to stretch my legs and grab more coffee. Nothing unusual. A few trucks parked, sleepy attendants, and a stray dog sleeping near the fuel pumps. That's where I had a quick chat with another driver, an older guy with graying hair, leaning against the hood of his Peterbilt. "Where you coming from, brother?" I asked, just making conversation. "Up from Wyoming," he answered, lighting up a cigarette. "But this stretch here always gives me the creeps when I drive it at night." "How so?" He let the smoke out slow, like he was thinking carefully before answering. "I don't know, man. Always feel like something's watching when I hit this section in the middle of the night." That stuck in my head, but I climbed back into the truck. Old-timers love telling ghost stories, so I didn't think much of it. Left the truck stop and kept rolling. The highway was getting more and more deserted, which was expected at this hour. Anyone who's not in a hurry has already stopped to rest. The ones still rolling are either trying to make deadlines or, like me, used to driving through the night. I spent more time trying to get conversation going on the CB, but no responses. On my cell, the signal kept cutting in and out, which was normal for that area too. That's when I heard the first noise, faint, muffled, coming from the trailer. At first, I didn't pay attention. Timber always creaks and groans, especially in a heavy truck, but after a few minutes, I heard it again. This time it was different. Sounds crazy to say this, but the noise sounded like crying. It wasn't normal creaking or cargo shifting. It was low, constant, like someone sobbing quietly inside the trailer. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My eyes stayed fixed on the road, but my mind was back there with the load. "I'm tired," I thought. "It's all in your head." Even so, I turned down the radio volume. The sound continued. I sped up, trying to distract myself, but now the noise seemed closer. And that's when I saw it in the corner of my mirror. The tarp on the trailer moved like something inside had bumped against it. My heart jumped in my chest. Couldn't be the wind. The tarp was tied down tight, stretched and secured to the hooks. If it moved, something had pushed it from the inside. I accelerated. The crying got louder, and for the first time on that trip, I started thinking maybe that trucker at the stop was right. My fingers gripped the wheel so tight I felt my knuckles go white. Whatever was happening back there didn't make sense. I knew my load. I watched the timber get stacked and tied down. There was nothing back there, just cut logs, nothing that could cry, nothing that could push the tarp from inside. So why the hell had that happened? I sped up, not from fear, at least that's what I wanted to believe, but because I wanted to get out of that deserted stretch fast. The closer to a truck stop or town, the better. But no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the sound continued. The crying was faint, muffled, but it wouldn't stop. Sounded like a small child, like someone back there was sobbing quietly. And the worst part, it seemed to be getting closer. Now the sound wasn't just coming from the trailer. It was closer to the cab, louder, clearer. I checked the dashboard. The truck was running normal, no mechanical problem alerts. But right then, I didn't care about the engine. I wanted to know who was crying, or better yet, what was crying. Part of me said to keep driving, get to somewhere busy, and only then check the load. But another part of me, maybe the more rational part, knew I couldn't ignore this forever. If there was an animal trapped in the trailer, if someone had gotten in without me noticing, if somehow something had been loaded along with the timber, I needed to know. I took a deep breath before making my decision. I was going to stop. The red lights of a truck stop appeared on the horizon, and it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't alone on the road anymore. The truck stop looked small, but at least there were a few trucks parked there, which gave me a bit more security. I hit the brakes slowly, downshifted, and pulled in. As soon as I shut off the engine, the crying stopped. The silence was so sudden my skin crawled. I rolled down the window and listened. Nothing. No sound except the distant hum of the truck, stopped lights, and noise from a radio playing some country music coming from the diner. I looked in my mirror. The trailer tarp was still, no sign of movement. For a moment, I felt like an idiot. Was I so tired I'd started hearing things? Was that it? There was only one way to be sure. I grabbed the flashlight from the dashboard, unlocked the door, and climbed down. The night air was cold, the smell of diesel fuel and dust filling the air. I walked around the truck and approached the trailer. The tarp was secure, no tears or openings. Even so, I needed a moment before I got the courage to pull the lever to open it up. It gave way with a sharp snap. I shined the light inside, and then I saw it. The timber logs were just like they'd been loaded, tied down, organized. Nothing out of place. No animal, no person hiding, nothing that could have made that noise. But there, right in the middle of the stacked timber, was something that shouldn't have been there. An old doll, dirty, made of cloth, thrown between the logs like it had been forgotten. I didn't touch it, but the instant I saw that thing, something inside me screamed to close the trailer and get out of there as fast as possible. My first instinct was to slam the trailer shut. I can't explain why, but seeing that doll thrown there in the middle of the timber gave me a chill that shot up my spine and locked my breathing for a second. That thing shouldn't have been there. I tried to think rationally. Maybe someone at the lumber mill had dropped it by accident. Maybe it had been stuck in some corner of the truck and only now had worked loose. But at the same time, it didn't make sense. The doll was dirty, old, but didn't look damaged like something that had spent days getting bounced around inside a truck loaded with timber. And the strangest part, it wasn't just lying there any old way. It was sitting up, leaning against the timber, like someone had placed it there on purpose. I stepped back and felt the cold night air hit my face. "Everything all right there, brother?" The voice came from behind me and nearly made me jump out of my skin. I spun around fast and saw another trucker standing near the fuel pumps. He was short, pot-bellied, wearing a faded cap and holding a cup of coffee. Looked like one of those old-school drivers who knows every pothole on the highway. "Everything's fine," I answered, trying to sound natural. He took a sip of coffee and looked at the open trailer. "What you hauling?" "Timber, picked it up in Kalispell, taking it to Billings." The man nodded like he'd done that route before. "Why'd you stop?" I looked at the doll still sitting there in the middle of the load. I felt a strange tightness in my chest before answering. "Thought I heard a strange noise," I said, choosing my words carefully. Didn't want to sound like a lunatic. The trucker frowned. "What kind of noise?" I hesitated for a second, then let it out. "Crying." His reaction was immediate. He stopped drinking his coffee and stared at me seriously, like he was trying to decide if I was joking or not. The silence lasted an uncomfortable amount of time. Then he lowered his voice and said, "Close that trailer and keep moving." The way he said that made my blood run cold. "What do you mean? You ever hear anything like that before?" He looked around like he didn't want anyone else to hear. Then he stepped closer and said, "Once, about 10 years ago, I stopped at a truck stop near Bozeman and heard a driver telling a story. Said he picked up a load of timber in Montana, and in the middle of the highway started hearing noises." My chest tightened. "Crying noises," the trucker nodded. He figured it was all in his head, but when he opened the trailer, he found a doll. My stomach turned over just like me. "What did he do?" I asked. The man pushed his cap down on his head and took a deep breath. Threw the doll away and kept driving. But the next day, when he stopped to sleep again, the doll was back in the load. A chill ran through my whole body. "You're messing with me." Wish I was kidding, but they say that driver never made it to his destination. His truck was found rolled over on the shoulder near a stretch of thick woods. I swallowed hard. And the driver, the trucker, drained his coffee in one gulp, then threw the cup on the ground and looked straight at me. Never found him. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I looked back at the doll. The same bad feeling took hold of me. "Listen," he said, now speaking lower. "I know you probably don't believe in this stuff. I didn't either. But I'm telling you, close that trailer and get out of here." I didn't need to hear it twice. I slammed the trailer shut like I was locking something inside. When I got back to the cab, my hand was shaking a little. I fired up the engine, checked my mirror one last time, and hit the gas. Left the truck stop behind and kept rolling. The first rays of sun were starting to appear on the horizon when I finally rolled into Billings. The smell of wet earth filled the cab, mixed with diesel and cold coffee in the cup holder. The CB was still quiet, and my cell still had no signal, but none of that mattered. I just wanted to drop this load and get out of there. After what happened at the truck stop, I didn't stop again. Not to stretch my legs, not to fuel up, nothing. The whole time I felt like if I stopped again, something would catch up to me. So when I saw the sign for the lumber company in the distance, my chest relaxed for the first time the entire trip. I backed the truck up to the loading dock and shut off the engine. Sat there for a few seconds, breathing deep, trying to convince myself it had all been fatigue. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Footsteps approached, and I saw the dock foreman, a middle-aged man with a blue cap and a crooked name tag on his chest. "How's it going, partner?" he asked, writing something on his clipboard. My mouth was dry. "Good," I answered, voice a little hoarse. He knocked on the side of the trailer and signaled for the workers to start unloading. "Come on, guys. Let's get this timber off here." I watched the two workers climb onto the trailer and untie the straps. I stood there motionless, waiting for them to say something. If the doll was there, what would I say? But minutes passed and nobody said anything. No strange reactions, no surprised expressions, just normal work. They removed the timber logs calmly while the foreman scribbled on his clipboard. "Looks good," he said. "You can sign here." I took the pen and signed the paper without taking my eyes off the trailer. The load was all there, every log in place. No empty spaces, no doll. My hand was still shaking a little when I handed back the clipboard. "Everything all right?" the foreman asked. I took a second to answer. "Everything's fine." He smiled and patted my shoulder. "Safe trip back." I nodded, climbed into the cab, and started the engine. But before leaving, I looked one last time in my mirror. The workers were sweeping out the empty trailer, getting ready for the next load. And for a brief instant, I swear to God I saw a shadow sitting in the middle of the trailer, bed small, hunched over, like a child. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and when I opened them again, there was nothing there. I didn't wait around. I got in the truck, put it in gear, and got out of there. Today, whenever someone asks me about routes through Montana, I change the subject. There are roads you avoid not because of bad pavement or lack of truck stops, but because some places hold things our minds can't explain. That doll, that crying, that shadow in my mirror. It all taught me that there are loads that go beyond timber, cattle, or grain. Sometimes the road delivers more than we bargained for. And since that night, I've learned to accept that there are mysteries better left unanswered, especially when they come wrapped up in a trailer that should be empty. After so many years running these highways, one thing I've learned: time is never on our side. You can plan your trip down to the minute, calculate fuel consumption, predict your stops, but there's always something that throws a wrench in the works. Could be a blown tire, a road closure, or like in my case, the engine giving out in the worst possible place. That day I was already running late. The freight was agricultural products leaving from the Central Valley of California, destination Fresno. Short haul, just a few hours, but the crossing over the San Joaquin River could always turn into a lottery. If things went right, I'd catch the ferry and keep rolling without delay. If luck turned bad, well, I'd be stuck there until I could fix whatever went wrong. And that's exactly what happened. I drove down the small dirt road that led to the makeshift ferry landing and found the barge about to depart. A skinny guy with a scraggly beard and a faded orange vest came up to me, waving for me to pull forward. "You crossing now, boss?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. "You got room?" He looked at the vessel. The ferry was big, but there were already about 3 trucks and 2 cars loaded on it. Nothing that would keep me from boarding. Sure does, come on up. I drove slowly to the center of the ferry, positioning carefully so I wouldn't take up too much space from the others. Shut off the engine, stretched my arms, and relaxed. Just had to wait to cross the river and keep rolling. But that's when fate decided to mess with me. When the ferry started pulling away from shore, I turned the key to fire up the engine and check the gauges. That's when I saw the engine warning light come on. I made a face. Not a good sign. Tried again. The engine turned over, coughed, and died. I pressed my lips together, trying to stay calm. With luck, it could just be a bad connection, but deep down I knew luck had already abandoned me that day. The ferry operator noticed my expression and walked over. Some kind of problem, Chief. Engine won't turn over. Guess I'll have to wait till we dock on the other side to look at it. He scratched his chin and shrugged. We'll be about 2 hours getting across. If you need help, there's a guy over there who knows a little about mechanics. But if that doesn't work, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. My stomach sank. What do you mean tomorrow? This is the last run of the day. After this one, not till morning. I looked at the shore getting farther and farther away. The sun had already set, and night brought that strange silence of isolated places. The river was an endless black void, reflecting the few lights from the ferry like broken glass. I was trapped there until the next day. I sighed. Nothing to do but accept it. I grabbed the flashlight from the dashboard, climbed out of the truck, and went to talk to the improvised mechanic. But deep down, a bad feeling started settling inside me. At that moment, I still didn't know the worst thing about that night wouldn't be being stranded. It would be discovering that something else was out there, hidden in the darkness of the river. The darkness over the river was different from highway darkness. On the road, even in isolated stretches, there's always some point of light on the horizon, a distant headlight, a forgotten street lamp, a reflection in the mirror. But out there on the water, it was absolute blackout. The moonless sky made everything even heavier. Only the sound of the ferry's engine and the noise of water moving around us reminded us that the world still existed. The improvised mechanic the ferry operator mentioned introduced himself as Frank. He was a young guy, early 20s maybe, skinny, sun-weathered skin, wearing a team jersey. He tried to help me get the truck started. If it's just the battery, we can try a jump in the morning, he said while I tested the ignition without success. If it was the battery, not even the dashboard lights would come on, I shot back, already irritated. He let out a low whistle and scratched his head. Then it's worse, huh? I didn't answer. I already knew I wasn't going to fix that out there. The thing to do was wait. I looked around. The other drivers were already sleeping inside their trucks, windows closed. The ferry operator and crew had retreated to a small room at the front of the vessel. Me, wide awake and out of patience, decided to get out of the cab and stretch my legs. The ferry swayed slightly under my feet. The sound of the water was almost hypnotic. I walked to the edge and leaned against the metal railing, looking out at the endless darkness of the river. That black vastness made me feel small. There was something strange about that silence, something oppressive, like the river was waiting. I shook my head, pushing the thought away. I pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and stood there blowing smoke slowly. The smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of the water creating a familiar but uncomfortable aroma. I'd been there just a few minutes when I heard the first strange thing of the night, a light sound of something touching the water. I looked around, nothing. Maybe a fish, I thought. The sand joaquin was full of them, but for some reason the noise bothered me. I flicked the cigarette into the water and decided to head back to the cab, try to sleep and let the night pass. But before turning my back to the river, I heard the noise in the water again. And then a low, weak voice from out in the middle of the darkness. I stopped dead. My blood went cold. The voice was calling me. My first instinct was to check if anyone else had heard that. The other drivers were still locked in their cabs. The ferry operator and crew were in the front part of the barge. They seemed to be sleeping. I was the only one awake, so who had spoken? I stood there, still with my back to the river. My body was tense, and the only thing I could hear now was the gentle sound of water lapping against the vessel. I started thinking I'd imagined it. Fatigue, stress from the day, all in my head. But then the voice came again, this time closer. My heart raced. Someone was definitely calling me. I swallowed hard and turned slowly, looking at the water. The black void of the river seemed denser now. It was like staring into a bottomless hole. The only light came from the ferry's spotlights, creating a yellowish circle around the vessel. But beyond that, just darkness. I moved a little closer to the edge, trying to see something. Nothing, no boat, no blinking light, no silhouette. But there was a feeling, a presence. Then came the sound again, the same noise of something touching the water. I felt a chill run up the back of my neck. I didn't want to look down. Every part of my body told me to go back to the truck, close the door, and forget about it. But my mind screamed something else. If I don't look, I'll never know what's out there. I leaned a little over the railing and aimed my phone's flashlight at the water. The beam of light cut through the dark, illuminating only the reflection of the ferry on the river. Small ripples spread across the surface, swaying gently like someone had thrown a stone. But there was nothing there, no boat, no fish, just the water moving. And then something emerged in the middle of the light. The surface of the river broke and something rose slowly. It was a pale face, soaking wet, with eyes fixed on me, and it was smiling. The air left my lungs. The thing kept rising, slowly revealing a thin neck and hands that looked like bones and started coming out of the water like they wanted to grab onto the edge of the ferry. The mouth opened slowly and spoke my name. My vision went dark for a second. I stumbled backward on instinct, tripping. My breathing was out of control. My chest was rising and falling fast. When I looked again, there was nothing there. The river was calm, just a circle of small ripples where that thing had appeared. I was no longer alone on that ferry. I don't know if I breathed during those seconds. My body was frozen, my muscles tense, like they were waiting for a command to react. But there was nothing I could do. Whatever that thing was had vanished into the darkness of the river, but I could still feel its presence. The water was calm, but my chest said otherwise. Every instinct in my body screamed that I needed to get out of there. I looked for any sign that someone else had seen it, but the rest of the crew kept sleeping. The truckers stayed in their cabs, oblivious. I was alone with that thing. I took 2 steps back and let out a shaky breath. The cold wind coming off the river made my skin crawl, like an invisible touch trying to reach me. I didn't stick around to see if it would come back. I turned quick and climbed into the truck cab. shut the door, and sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to get control of my breathing. I stayed like that for I don't know how long. The clock seemed to have stopped. The ferry continued its course, slow and silent, cutting through the darkness of the river like a shadow. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the engine vibrate different. The movement of the vessel changed, and lights from shore started appearing. I'd never been so relieved to see dry land. As soon as we docked, the truckers woke up. The crew started shouting instructions, and the ferry operator came over to me. My heart was still hammering in my chest, but my mind had only one thought. I needed to get out of there. I turned the key. The engine coughed once and caught. I didn't ask how, didn't want to know. I just hit the gas and drove off that ferry without looking back. When the wheels touched the asphalt on the other side of the river, an invisible weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time during that crossing, I felt safe. Today, years later, I still wonder what I really saw that night. Whether it was fatigue, whether it was fear, whether it was something my mind created to make sense of the inexplicable. But one thing I know for certain: some experiences mark us in a way we can never forget. And since then, every time I need to cross a river at night, part of me still remembers that pale face emerging from the darkness. That's why, whenever I can, I avoid nighttime crossings. Some lessons you learn in a way you never forget. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.